Chapter 119. 3 days later. The moon was like a silver plate and the sky was filled with stars. Nye Tian pushed open the door and slowly walked out with a long sword in his hand. Under the moonlight, the sword gleamed coldly. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash, it has finally shown its brilliance. Nye Tian stared at the sword in his hand and smiled. After 3 days and 3 nights, Nye Tian finally refined the Star Soul Stone and successfully integrated it into the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash. The Sword Absolute Heaven Slash that had been dormant for 100 years finally showed its brilliance. The Sword Absolute Heaven Slash was originally a 9th rank Emperor weapon. After being reforged by the Star Soul Stone, although it had shown its brilliance, it was still far from being a 9th rank Emperor weapon. After all, the Star Soul Stone was only a 7th rank spiritual material. Nye Tian estimated that the power of the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash was comparable to a 3rd rank spiritual weapon. A 3rd rank spiritual weapon was already very good, at least for the current Nye Tian, it was enough. The incident of Nye Yuro being robbed a few days ago still made Nye Tian's heart palpitate. He would not allow such a thing to happen a second time. Nye Tian urgently felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Strength, only strength had the greatest authority. Only with sufficient strength could one ensure that the people around him would not be harmed. Nye Tian came to the Jin clan's martial field and prepared to test out the power of the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash, my old friend, accompany me to conquer the world again. Nye Tian raised the sword in his hand and stabbed out. Instantly, dozens of sword shadows appeared in the air, dazzling and dazzling. It's been 100 years, I wonder how much of my sword cultivation I have left. Nye Tian held the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash tightly and circulated his Yuan meridians. Suddenly, the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash's blade shone brightly and instantly condensed into a terrifying sword image that was 10 meters long. The sharp light seemed to have the power to cut through everything. Sword Consummate Heaven Slash. Kill! Nye Tian bellowed as he slashed his sword down. In the next moment, sword light filled the air, along with an astonishing momentum. Boom! With a loud bang, the huge wooden pile, which was as thick as a water bucket, suddenly shattered and turned into sawdust. On the ground, there was a deep gully that was 10 meters long. Nye Tian looked at the sawdust in front of him and frowned slightly. He muttered to himself, "Looks like I'm still too weak. I can only form a 10-meter sword light at full power." 10 meters of sword light. To others, this was already an almost horrifying number. After all, Nye Tian only had 5th-level origin spirit strength. But for Nye Tian, this power was far from enough. In his previous life, when Nye Tian used his full strength, he could condense a sword light that was tens of thousands of feet long. With just a smile, he had the power to break mountains and slash the moon. That was truly terrifying. It's time to recultivate the AO sword tactics. Nye Tian smiled and began to practice the sword. Under the moonlight, the young man's figure moved agilely, one sword after another, each stronger than the last. Under this kind of boring practice, he gradually entered a state of emptiness. At this moment, in Nye Tian's eyes, apart from himself and the Heaven Slash sword technique, nothing else existed. Proud sword tactics. The sword was proud of the sky, overlooking everything. After his rebirth, Nye Tian must comprehend the profound meaning of the AO sword tactics over and over again in order to have the opportunity to exert the AO sword tactics to the extreme. The AO sword tactics was a super AO sword tactics created by Nye Tian in his previous life by combining several kinds of heaven-class sword tactics, coupled with his own unique profound understanding of the sword. The sword doctrine focused on comprehending the true meaning of the sword doctrine. The path of the sword doctrine was divided into 10 realms: sword moves, sword techniques, sword chi, sword heart, sword intent, sword power, sword spirit, sword soul, and sword profound. Ordinary martial artists could only stay in the realm of sword moves and sword techniques for their entire lives. Those who could condense sword chi were already considered geniuses of the sword doctrine. Those who could comprehend the sword heart and sword intent and create their own sword power were 1 in a million. As for the sword spirit, sword soul, and sword soul, only real sword doctrine grandmasters could reach them. As for the 10th realm of sword profound, only monstrous geniuses at the peak of sword doctrine could have a glimpse of it. In his previous life, Nye Tian was a monstrous genius who had reached the sword profound. He created his own sword doctrine profound, AO. Even a fanatic of the sword doctrine like the limitless sword saint specially came to the day-night god realm to ask Nye Tian for advice on the sword doctrine. After his rebirth, Nye Tian's comprehension of the sword doctrine was still there. Unfortunately, the sword heart in his body was gone and needed to be nurtured again. The sword heart was the heart of a swordsman. After that, the sword intent, sword power, and sword spirit all came from the sword heart. Losing the sword heart was both a bad and a good thing for Nye Tian. The bad thing was that he had to recultivate the sword doctrine. The good thing was that he had the opportunity to comprehend different sword doctrines. Nye Tian had already comprehended the AO sword heart in his previous life. In this life, when he recultivated the sword doctrine, he had the opportunity to comprehend different sword doctrines. If he could comprehend 2 kinds of sword profound at the same time, it would be enough for Nye Tian to be unrivaled in the heaven god realm with his attainments in the sword doctrine alone. At this moment, Nye Tian made endless moves over and over again in order to comprehend the mystery of the AO sword tactics. With the sword doctrine comprehension in his previous life as a foundation, Nye Tian's cultivation of the sword doctrine progressed at a tremendous pace. 300 billion sword shadows. Nye Tian stabbed out with his sword. Suddenly, the sword shadows were overflowing in the air. A stream of light cut through the night sky, and an astonishing sword chi swept out. Nye Tian put away the sword absolute heaven slash and smiled indifferently. Very good, I have condensed the sword chi. Next, I only need to spend some time to accumulate the sword heart with the sword chi, and I can reach the sword heart realm. In just half a day, Nye Tian directly reached the sword chi realm. If others knew this, they would definitely regard him as a monster. After condensing the sword chi, Nye Tian found something strange in the sword chi. His sword chi seemed to contain 2 kinds of aura. One was the arrogant sword chi of the AO sword tactics, and the other was the more overbearing and vigorous sword chi. Moreover, the 2 kinds of sword chi actually merged into one in a wonderful way. If it were not for Nye Tian's high understanding of the sword doctrine, he would not even be able to find this. 300 billion sword shadows. Nye Tian made another move and felt it carefully. His eyes showed surprise. This is the aura of the power of the stars. After carefully perceiving it, Nye Tian found that the other kind of sword chi was quite similar to the power of the stars. Condensing 2 kinds of sword chi at the same time, even Nye Tian, the ultimate genius of the sword doctrine, had never encountered such a thing. Ha ha! After a long while, Nye Tian could not suppress the excitement in his heart and laughed wildly. 2 kinds of sword chi, which also meant that Nye Tian would nurture 2 sword hearts. Nurturing 2 sword hearts at the same time, this was absolutely unprecedented and shocking news. Previously, Nye Tian only held a glimmer of hope that he could comprehend 2 kinds of sword ultimacy. But now, he had full confidence that he could definitely comprehend 2 kinds of sword ultimacy. 2 kinds of sword ultimacy, ha ha! Nye Tian could not help but laugh wildly. He looked up and said, Emperor Chenin, Luoxian, you father and daughter just wait. The day when I, Nye Tian, return to the divine realm is not far away. When I return to the divine realm, it will be the day when you pay with your blood. The arrogant words swore the anger in Nye Tian's heart. He had never forgotten what Luo Chunhun and Luo Xian, father and daughter, had done to him. Chapter 120. The next morning, the sun rose, its red glow filling half the sky. Nie Tian walked out of his room. After a night's rest, he had recovered to his peak condition. Because of the primal chaos original coffin, Nie Tian only needed a short period of time to fully recover. During breakfast, Nie Tian was surprised to find that Nieyuro was already at the 7th level of the Origin Meridian Realm. 7th level of the Origin Meridian Realm. For a 9-year-old child, this kind of strength was extremely heaven-defying. It turned out that while Nie Tian had been training hard, Nieyuro had also been training hard. Big brother Nie Tian, Ro will definitely train hard. In the future, I will be able to protect big brother Nie Tian. At the dining table, Nieyuro's eyes shone like black gems as she said seriously. The little girl hugged little Guai, her face serious and determined, her expression indescribably cute. Nie Tian pinched Nieyuro's pink cheeks and nodded with a smile. All right. Then I will wait for the day Ro becomes a peerless martial artist. Nieyuro nodded heavily, her expression even more serious. After breakfast, Nie Tian gave Nieyuro 10 channel awakening pills, reminding her to take one every day. Once she reached the 9th level of the Origin Meridian Realm, she would not need to eat anymore. When Nie Tian first refined the channel awakening pills, he had originally prepared them for Nieyuro. It was just that he did not have the time to give them to her. Thank you, big brother Nie Tian. Nieyuro carefully put away the channel awakening pills. She suddenly thought of something and said, Big brother Nie Tian, you said that if Ro becomes an essence spirit martial artist, you will give Ro a magical storage bag. Don't forget. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. When Ro becomes an essence spirit martial artist, I will give Ro something even better than a storage bag. Really? Nieyuro's eyes suddenly shone brightly, she was extremely happy. Of course. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He had plundered 2 spatial rings from the Ju Wan and Ju Qian brothers, and he could give one to Nieyuro. However, Nieyuro's current strength was too weak, and she was also too young. Nie Tian would not give it to her for the time being. Thank you, big brother Nie Tian. Don't forget, big brother Nie Tian. Ro will be able to become an essence spirit martial artist very soon. Nieyuro ran off happily, returning to her room alone to concentrate on her cultivation. Nie Tian looked at Nieyuro's small back and softly whispered, It looks like I need to find a teacher for Ro. Nieyuro's talent was not bad. If she had a suitable teacher, her future achievements would definitely not be low. Perhaps she really would have the chance to become a peerless martial artist. Nie Tian's tyrannical bear martial art was not suitable for Nieyuro. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly thought of a person who was extremely suitable to be Nieyuro's teacher. Rui Qianyu, are you willing to accept Ro as your disciple? Nie Tian would definitely not randomly find a teacher for Nieyuro. Currently, the only person who could meet Nie Tian's expectations was Rui Qianyu. Rui Qianyu was only 20 years old, but she was already a true element martial artist. Her talent and strength did not need to be mentioned. If Ro could follow by her side, it would not be a bad choice. Following that, Nie Tian went to visit Qiushan. The latter's injuries were still very serious, and if he wanted to fully recover, he would still need some time. Originally, Nie Tian had planned to treat Qiushan's damaged Yuan meridians in a few days, but the latter had suddenly been injured, so he could only delay the treatment. Coming out from Qiushan's residence, Nie Tian found Jean de Bao and prepared to make a trip to Tyrant Cloud Academy. In the following period of time, Nie Tian was prepared to borrow the Spirit Gathering Array and the cultivation room of Tyrant Cloud Academy to cultivate. Of course, he did not forget the 1-month appointment with Rui Qianyu. In 1 month's time, Nie Tian had to reach the strength of a manifestation martial artist. Entering Tyrant Cloud Academy, Nie Tian and Jean de Bao went straight to the cultivation room. Along the way, many people recognized Nie Tian and did not conceal their admiration for him. There were also many people who took the initiative to jump out and greet him. However, Nie Tian paid no attention to any of them. "Boss, we've arrived at the cultivation room." Soon, the two of them arrived at the cultivation room of Tyrant Cloud Academy. Jean de Bao pointed to the rows of small arrays in front of them and said, the cultivation room was a small room with a powerful spirit gathering array around it. It could condense heaven and earth spiritual energy and help martial artists cultivate faster. Third-grade spirit gathering array, not bad. Nie Tian only glanced at it and immediately saw that the spirit gathering array in front of him was a third-grade array. It could make the heaven and earth spiritual energy inside the array 3 times denser than outside. 3 times denser heaven and earth spiritual energy could basically increase a martial artist's cultivation speed by 3 times. This was a very terrifying concept. Under the accumulation of days and months, it was enough to make the disparity between martial artists produce an earth-shattering change. Nie Tian was already a student of Tyrant Cloud Academy now, but he naturally did not have the slightest interest in teacher Tyrant Cloud's lectures. Moreover, if not for the urgency of time, he would not use such a trashy spirit-gathering array either. Although the current Nie Tian's mental power dropped to only Tier 40, he could also set up a Tier 4 spirit-gathering array. It was just that the setting up of the spirit-gathering array was very complicated. Furthermore, Nie Tian did not have the place and spiritual materials to set up the array. Hence, he could only make do with borrowing Tyrant Cloud Academy's array. "Boss, let's hurry up. Otherwise, the cultivation room will be occupied by people." Jean de Bao was somewhat excited as he said with a chuckle. Nie Tian said frankly, "I'm the newcomer king. I should have the priority to use the cultivation room." Jean de Bao chuckled and said, "That's the case, but the actual situation is not like that." Nie Tian frowned slightly, not quite understanding what Jean de Bao meant. "Yo, isn't this young Master Jean? What wind blew you here?" Right at this time, a voice full of ridicule sounded out. Several youths in fine clothes appeared, arrogantly blocking Nie Tian and Jean de Bao's path. Senior apprentice Brother Liang. When Jean de Bao saw the appearance of the person who spoke clearly, he immediately laughed dryly twice and said, "Me and my boss came to the cultivation room to cultivate." "What a coincidence, Senior apprentice Brother Liang is here too." "Boss?" That youth who was addressed as Senior Apprentice Brother Liang by Jean de Bao raised his brows. Shooting a glance at Nie Tian, he snorted coldly and said, "Bullsh *T boss. Here, I Liang Yunfeng am the boss." Liang Yunfeng's words were immediately seconded by the lackeys behind him. "Yeah, Jean de Bao, you drank cat piss and became muddle-headed, right? Why don't you look at what kind of trash the people around you are? Boss? Even if he were to be number 2 for your father wouldn't want him." "That's right. Isn't it just a puny little newcomer king? He can only throw his weight around in the outer court. Want to call himself boss in front of us, inner court disciples? Far from it. Pooh. A mere essence spirit martial artist. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? Your hair isn't even fully grown yet and you're already trying to be the boss. You probably won't even know how you die in the future." The mocking voices were each more ear-piercing than the last. Nie Tian had heard Jean de Bao mention before that Tyrant Cloud Academy had outer court disciples and inner court disciples. Only martial artists whose cultivation reached the manifestation realm could enter the inner court. Without a doubt, these few people in front of him were Tyrant Cloud Academy's inner court disciples. Nie Tian swept a glance over the few people in front of him. Apart from Liang Yunfeng, who had the strength of 3rd-level manifestation realm, the rest were all 1st-level manifestation realm. Chapter 121. Scram. Nie Tianling glared at Liang Yunfeng coldly. He didn't want to waste any more words and roared. He didn't have much time to waste with a bunch of idiots. If these idiots didn't open their eyes, he didn't mind teaching them a lesson. Huh! Liang Yunfeng's eyes turned cold, and his whole body released an undisguised chill. Jean de Bao swallowed his saliva and whispered to Nie Tian, "Boss, he is an inner court disciple. He was ordered by the academy to manage the training ground." Jean de Bao stole a glance at Liang Yunfeng and whispered, "Liang Yunfeng is Liang Yunlong's elder brother. He obviously wants to avenge his younger brother." Nie Tian smiled playfully and stared at Liang Yunfeng. No wonder he looked so familiar. Liang Yunlong was defeated by Nie Tian in one move during the freshman martial meet. Not only was he seriously injured, but even his Yuan burst pill was snatched away by Nie Tian. Liang Yunlong being beaten up was a small matter, but the Liang family lost face because of it. The Liang family was considered one of the big families in Blue Cloud City. Their disciple was defeated in front of everyone and robbed. Of course they couldn't swallow this. Especially Liang Yunfeng, who had been waiting for Nie Tian to appear. Unfortunately, Nie Tian had been recovering for the past few days. Yesterday, he had been delayed by Nie Yuro's matter. Today was his first time coming to Tyrant Cloud Academy. Liang Yunfeng was in charge of managing the training grounds. How could he let Nie Tian off when he met him in his territory? That's right. Liang Yunlong roared and said without hesitation, "I am Liang Yunlong's elder brother. You injured my younger brother, so I will avenge him today." Nie Tian was the newcomer king and Zhang Yifeng's teacher. He was in the limelight in Blue Cloud City. Liang Yunfeng naturally didn't dare to kill Nie Tian, but he still had to teach him a lesson. "With just you?" Nie Tianling sneered, and a strange smile appeared on his face. The battle between Nie Tian and Liang Yunlong was supposed to be a fair fight. Life and death were up to fate. Moreover, it was Liang Yunlong who provoked him first. If Nie Tian was a little weaker, he might not even be alive today. Liang Yunfeng seeking revenge for Liang Yunlong with such great fanfare was simply making trouble for no reason. "More than enough to teach you a lesson." Liang Yufeng clenched his fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. A tyrannical aura had already exploded out, causing the expressions of the surrounding onlookers to change. "Brother Feng, there's no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. I, Zhao Ho, am enough to deal with this puny origin spirit stage trash." Before Liang Yufeng could make a move, a skinny young man with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks jumped out from behind him. His small eyes looked as if he had not woken up yet as he shouted arrogantly. These inner court disciples had all heard of Nie Tian's great name. Unfortunately, not many of them had actually seen him fight. As for Nie Tian defeating Lan Binji and going against Qin Yetian, they all thought that it was just an exaggeration. No one believed that an essence spirit martial artist could fight against a giant spirit martial artist. Hiss hiss. Zhao Ho let out a strange laugh and immediately made a move with lightning speed. Zhao Ho clenched his hand into a claw, and a sharp white bone claw instantly appeared in the air. With a shrill whistle, it struck towards Nie Tian's neck. Zhao Ho's attack was ruthless and decisive. He aimed at Nie Tian's vital point the moment he made a move. If this claw hit Nie Tian, he would either die or be seriously injured. Nie Tian did not panic. His body only shook slightly and a sharp sword aura whizzed out. Ah! In the next moment, accompanied by a miserable howl like a pig being slaughtered, Zhao Ho's 5 fingers flew into the air and drew several lines of blood. Sword aura! Sharp sword aura! Nie Tian did not even draw his sword. Just relying on the murderous sword aura, he easily cut off Zhao Ho's 5 fingers. The scene that entered everyone's eyes shocked them. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. Looking at Nie Tian, who did not move at all, they felt their tailbones turn cold. "Ah! My fingers!" Zhao Ho cried out in pain and picked up the fingers on the ground while trembling. but when he wanted to pick up the last finger, he was stepped on by a foot. Nie Tian exerted force with his foot and the finger was stepped on into meat paste. You! Zhao Ho raised his head in shock. He was so scared that he trembled. The finger that he picked up with great difficulty fell onto the ground again. Nie Tianling said coldly, "Losing one finger, take it as a lesson for you. Next time, don't offend those people that you don't understand." Zhao Ho looked at Nie Tian in fear. He hurriedly picked up the other fingers and ran away as fast as he could, looking for someone to help him connect his fingers. Nie Tian slightly raised his head, looked at Liang Yunfeng and said indifferently, "Your dog was beaten away, now it's your turn. Didn't you want to teach me a lesson? I'll give you a chance now, make your move." Only now did Liang Yunfeng walk out from his shock. Everything that happened just now was too strange, it was simply unimaginable. The few people behind Liang Yunfeng were all scared to the point that their faces turned deathly white. They were rejoicing in their hearts. Luckily the person who attacked Nie Tian just now was not me. Under everyone's gaze, Liang Yunfeng was really too embarrassed to admit defeat. He mustered up the greatest courage he had in his entire life and said fiercely, "Stinking brat, since you are seeking death, I will fulfill your wish." Before he finished speaking, Liang Yunfeng immediately made his move. Swish! A golden blade appeared in the air. The blade was over a meter long and emitted a terrifying aura as it struck down towards Nie Tian. "Boss, be careful!" Jean de Bao cried out in shock and couldn't help but retreat. Nie Tian was already prepared for Liang Yunfeng's move. This time, he only slightly leaned his body to the side and dodged Liang Yunfeng's blade. At the same time, he condensed his finger into a sword and pointed out with his finger. A whistling sound came from the air and an astonishing sword chi gushed out. Dang! As if gold and stone collided, a loud sound rang out. The sword chi struck on the golden blade. Liang Yunfeng immediately felt a tremendous force ripple out. His wrist went numb right after, and a bloody wound actually tore open between his thumb and forefinger. The golden blade shattered right away. Liang Yunfeng cried out miserably and retreated several steps, a mouthful of fresh blood spurting out wildly. The entire place fell silent once more. It was so quiet that even a needle dropping could be heard. Even breathing sounds could be heard clearly. Nobody could have thought that Liang Yunfeng would actually be defeated by Nie Tian in one move. What made people most unable to accept was that Nie Tian did not even take out his weapon, let alone use his primordial spirit. Jean de Bao was also dumbfounded. Several days ago, wasn't Nie Tian still at the same level as Lan Binji? Now, he was actually able to utterly crush Liang Yunlong. This kind of improvement speed was too monstrous. Nie Tian was currently 5th level essence spirit strength. Compared to several days ago, the greatest difference was that he awakened the power of 32 stars and condensed 2 kinds of sword chi. The most terrifying thing was that Nie Tian's sword chi could unleash the might of the power of stars to the extreme. Compared to fists and palms, its might was several times stronger. The current Nie Tian, even if he did not use his star souls, could still completely crush any martial artist below 5th level Wanxiang. Liang Yunfeng held his injured wrist with one hand, his eyes filled with hatred as he stared fixedly at Nie Tian, as if he wanted to skin the latter alive. "Let's go." Nie Tian did not even look at Liang Yunfeng as he directly strode into the training grounds. This was Tyrant Cloud Academy. Nie Tian did not wish to kill anyone. Liang Yunfeng stared at Nie Tian's back, his eyes filled with venom. Chapter 122. Boss! Jean de Bao's reaction was very fast. He shouted and stood up to block the saber for Nie Tian. Jean de Bao had the primordial spirit of the Godfiend blood scroll, so his reaction at close range was even sharper than Nie Tian's. "You're courting death." Nie Tian seemed to have expected Liang Yunfeng's move. He roared Lung and another sharp sword chi gushed out. Puff! The sword chi swept past, and Liang Yunfeng's arm was directly cut off. Bang! At the same time, the golden saber slashed Jean de Bao's back. The latter fell to the ground, but he was unharmed. Nie Tian knew that Jean de Bao was wearing the golden thunder armor, so he was at ease to let the latter block the saber for him. The golden thunder armor was naturally returned to the Jean family by the Qin family. Nie Tian was very puzzled. What exactly was Jean de Bao's primordial spirit? How could it be so sharp? Nie Tian was able to react in an instant because he could see that Liang Yunfeng wouldn't stop, so he waited for Liang Yunfeng to make a move. Jean de Bao, on the other hand, reacted immediately. His keen perception was even stronger than Nie Tian's. Ah, my arm! After a short moment of astonishment, Liang Yunfeng suddenly felt a bone-piercing pain and immediately wailed like a ghost. Nie Tianling looked at Liang Yunfeng coldly and said, "Liang Yunfeng, you're really hateful to stab someone in the back. This is a lesson for you. Don't let me see you again next time." After saying that, Nie Tian turned and walked into the training field, leaving Liang Yunfeng howling in pain on the ground. Liang Yunfeng attacked Nie Tian from behind, but Nie Tian didn't kill him and only cut off one of his arms, which was already very merciful. If they weren't in Tyrant Cloud Academy at the moment, Nie Tian would never show mercy to Liang Yunfeng. After all, Liang Yunfeng was an inner court disciple of Tyrant Cloud Academy, and he was also the person in charge of the training field. If he was killed in the training field, it would be really troublesome. Liang Yunfeng was still alive, and there were so many witnesses that he was the one who provoked him, so even if the academy was involved, Qi Feng would definitely be able to protect Nie Tian. Nie Tian would not stay in the domineering Cloud Academy for too long. After a month, he would return from his cultivation with Rainy Qinya, and then he would start dealing with the Bloodbat sect. Once the Bloodbat sect was eradicated, Tian would leave Tyrant sect and leave the Blue Cloud Empire and go to a wider world. At least, that was his plan. However, he didn't know. When Nie Tian and Jean de Bao arrived at the cultivation field, they saw that the first few rows of cultivation rooms were already occupied. De Bao, Nie Tian, Tian and de Bao. De Bao. Jean. Tian de Bao. Dan. Tian de Bao. What? Nie Dong. What? De Bao hesitated for a moment before saying, "Boss, the 20 training rooms in this row are for the top 20 in the inner court. Others can't enter." Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he smiled. "Is this a rule of Tyrant Cloud Academy?" "No." Jean de Bao shook his head. Seeing Jean de Bao hesitating, Nie Tian immediately understood. Since it wasn't a rule of the academy, it was obvious that the top 20 disciples in the inner court had used their strength to forcibly occupy the training rooms. Jean de Bao was afraid that Nie Tian would force his way into the training rooms, so he didn't dare to say it. Even when they are not around, no one is allowed to enter these 20 training rooms, right? Nie Tian asked directly. Yes. A worried look appeared on Jean de Bao's face, but he still nodded. What an overbearing top 20 disciple. Nie Tian smiled faintly. Without hesitation, he turned and was about to enter an empty training room in front of him. "Who allowed you to enter?" Scram! Just as Nie Tian stepped into the training room, an ear-piercing roar came from behind him. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He turned and saw a young man in luxurious clothes glaring at him angrily. The young man in luxurious clothes was about 15 or 16 years old. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and a handsome face. He gave off a very cold and sharp feeling. Nie Tian looked at the young man in luxurious clothes in front of him, and was slightly shocked. He felt an unusual aura from the young man. Sword Chi. The young man carried a long sword on his back. It was obvious that he was a swordsman. Interesting. This guy is actually a martial artist who specializes in sword Dao. Nie Tian's lips curled up slightly, revealing a rather playful smile. At this moment, the surrounding people recognized the identity of the young man in luxurious clothes and were all shocked. He is Shang Mingjie, a disciple of Sword Dao aristocratic family, Shang family. Shang family is the only Sword Dao aristocratic family in Blue Cloud Empire. Everyone in Shang family is devoted to Sword Dao. I heard that the family has an advanced yellow tier sword technique. I wonder if it's true. Advanced yellow tier sword technique. Really? It should be true. Look at Shang Mingjie. He's only 16 years old, and he entered the Inner Institute last year. He only used a year to become one of the top 20 disciples in the Inner Institute. How terrifying! Nie Tian looked at Shang Mingjie and thought to himself, condensing sword chi at 16 years old. His talent in Sword Dao can barely be considered trash. His strength is at the 3rd tier of the manifestation realm, and he has condensed sword chi. No wonder he can enter the top 20 of the Inner Institute. Sword techniques, sword arts, and sword chi. Every level of Sword Dao was like an insurmountable mountain. The vast majority of people in the world stopped at the stage of sword techniques and sword arts. Only an extremely small portion of people could condense sword chi. Precisely because of this, there were very few martial artists who specialized in Sword Dao. Shang Mingjie was able to condense sword chi at 16 years old. His talent in Sword Dao couldn't be considered trash. However, compared to Nie Tian, this talent was not just a little bit inferior. Rather, it was tens of thousands of times worse. This was because Nie Tian had only used half a day's time to condense sword chi. Moreover, he had condensed 2 types of sword chi. This cultivation room isn't for you to enter. Get lost. Shang Mingjie glanced at Nie Tian, his tone full of arrogance. Nie Tian smiled playfully and said, "What if I insist on entering?" He was the newcomer king. According to the rules of the academy, he had the right to use all cultivation resources first. Not to mention that the cultivation room in front of him was empty right now. Even if there were people inside, he could let them out. Shang Mingjie was slightly startled. He took a step forward and said coldly with a threatening aura, "This is His Highness Binji's cultivation room. If you insist on entering, then you are courting death." What a coincidence! The cultivation room that Nie Tian wanted to enter was Lan Binji's cultivation room. Although Lan Binji wasn't in the top 20 of the Inner Institute, he was a prince, so he was treated as one of the top 20. Also, looking at Shang Mingjie's posture, he was obviously Lan Binji's lackey. Haha, Nie Tian laughed and didn't dodge. He said, "What a coincidence. I like to court death. It's a pity that I haven't met anyone who can kill me yet." If this was someone else's cultivation room, Shang Mingjie would persuade him nicely, and Nie Tian would have a trace of possibility to give up. But this was Lan Binji's cultivation room. Nie Tian had to enter. Is that so? Shang Mingjie's eyes turned cold. The long sword on his back let out a low sword cry. He was considered a top figure in Tyrant Cloud Academy. There had never been anyone who dared to speak in front of him like this. Shang Mingjie felt that his prestige was being questioned. Chapter 123. Boss. Sensing Shang Mingjie's anger, Jean de Bao tugged at Nie Tian, reminding him not to be too arrogant. Shang Mingjie was the inner court's top 20 disciples, far from what people like Liang Yunfeng could compare to. What worried Jean de Bao even more was that Shang Mingjie was already Lan Binji's man. Nie Tian and Lan Binji were originally already incompatible like fire and water. Under such circumstances, it was better not to take the initiative to provoke Lan Binji. What worried Jean de Bao even more was that Shang Mingjie's big brother, Shang Mingyu, was the inner court's #1 powerhouse. Even if Nie Tian could beat Shang Mingjie, he definitely could not be Shang Mingyu's mat. Yes. Nie Tian completely ignored Jean de Bao's reminder. Looking at the already enraged Shang Mingjie, he smiled faintly and said, "Make your move. If I guessed correctly, your sword chi was condensed half a year ago. Coincidentally, I also condensed sword chi accidentally last night. Let me see whose sword chi is stronger." Boss, you condensed sword chi. Nie Tian's words made Jean de Bao dumbfounded, his fat face making an extremely exaggerated pose. In Jean de Bao's eyes, Nie Tian's talent was already needless to say. Not only was his martial arts talent heaven-defying, but he was also an alchemist. He also seemed to know a lot about spiritual materials. He even had some research on spirit arrays. Now, Nie Tian actually condensed sword chi again. This really became a decathlon. The surrounding people also looked at Nie Tian in shock, their faces full of disbelief. Sword chi, how could it be condensed so easily? So many martial artists flinched at the sight of the path of the sword because the path of the sword was too arduous. The requirements for sword Dao talent were very high. It was not something that ordinary people could hope for. If sword chi was so easy to condense, then everyone would be a sword Dao grandmaster. Most people felt that Nie Tian must be lying, deliberately scaring Shang Mingjie and making the latter retreat. This kind of intimidation was too childish. Shang Mingjie was also not a 3-year-old kid. You really condensed sword chi? Others didn't believe Nie Tian's words, but that didn't mean that Shang Mingjie didn't believe him. He carefully sensed Nie Tian's aura, and indeed, he sensed a strong sword chi. I just condensed it by accident. Nie Tian smiled faintly, speaking as if condensing sword chi was as easy as eating and drinking. His actions successfully angered Shang Mingjie's weak little heart. Shang Mingjie thought that Nie Tian was insulting him, mocking his sword Dao talent for being trash. Actually, there was no need for Nie Tian to mock him. His talent was trash to begin with. What a good accidentally. Let me see whether or not you will accidentally die. Shang Mingjie shouted angrily, and the long sword on his back was unsheathed. The sharp cry of the sword could almost pierce one's eardrums. Your sword is not good enough. You should use your origin spirit. Nie Tian smiled faintly, not panicking in the slightest. He had long seen that Shang Mingjie's origin spirit was a sword spirit. Although the long sword on his back was not bad, and was already a rank 2 spiritual weapon, it was a pity that its power was far from being as strong as a origin spirit. Arrogant! Shang Mingjie was instantly angered, and no longer had any scruples. He took out his long sword and stabbed out. Instantly, a sharp sword chi pierced through the air, and suddenly attacked Nie Tian. The surrounding crowd let out a cry of surprise, and retreated, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Nie Tian did not move, and did not even take out his sword Absolute Heaven Slash. He only condensed his fingers into a sword, and instantly, a sword chi shot out from his fingertip. Pooh! The sword chi collided with the sword chi, but only a slight shattering sound was heard. Everyone did not know what had happened, and then in the next moment, dang! A crisp sound rang out. The long sword in Shang Mingjie's hand suddenly trembled, and a strange force transmitted to his wrist, causing the webbing between his thumb and forefinger to suddenly ache. Instantly, the long sword fell to the ground with a clang. Shang Mingjie also suffered the impact of the strange force, retreating several steps, and even almost falling down. This, impossible! Shang Mingjie looked at Nie Tian furiously, completely unable to believe the scene before his eyes. The other party was clearly only at the 5th level origin spirit realm. How was it possible that he did not even draw his sword, and just relied on a wisp of sword chi to force him into such a sorry state? Shang Mingjie was not the only one who could not figure it out. The gazes of the surrounding people when looking at Nie Tian all became astonishment and shock, and at the same time carried deep fear. Boss actually forced Shang Mingjie back without drawing his sword? Jean de Bao's throat made a gulping sound. His mouth opened so wide that an egg could practically be stuffed in. The disparity between Shang Mingjie and Nie Tian was not the disparity in cultivation, but the disparity in sword Dao comprehension and sword chi. Although Nie Tian's sword Dao realm was only at the sword chi realm, his sword Dao comprehension was at the peak monstrous level. Forget about an ant like Shang Mingjie. Even in the entire heaven realm's divine realm, those who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Nie Tian in sword Dao were also scarce. Another point was that Shang Mingjie's sword Qi and Nie Tian's sword Qi were also very far apart. How could the sword Qi condensed from the proud sword art and the sword Qi produced from the star origin stone be comparable to the sword Qi condensed from a high-grade yellow-rank sword art? I said before, your sword is too lousy. Better use your origin spirit. Nie Tian looked at Shang Mingjie, who was as shocked as a grasshopper, and smiled calmly. Shang Mingjie's sword was indeed very lousy, only a Tier 2 spirit artifact. It was even inferior to Nie Tian's sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Although the sword Absolute Heaven Slash was far from recovering to the level of a Tier 9 Emperor artifact, it was already comparable to a Tier 3 spirit artifact. If Nie Tian used his sword at this moment, Shang Mingjie would already be a corpse. Shang Mingjie reacted and almost flew into a rage as he roared, "Little bastard, you asked for this." Shang Mingjie did not know who Nie Tian was at all, but because the latter had angered him, he directly had the intention to kill him. Swish! With a furious roar, a cyan long sword appeared behind Shang Mingjie, suffused with a faint silver light. The sword aura spread out 3 feet, causing people's hearts to palpitate. It's really the sword spirit. Everyone gasped. Shang Mingjie is angry, he wants to kill. Everyone couldn't help but retreat. Nie Tian was also slightly stunned. He did not expect Shang Mingjie to be so overbearing. Just like this, he really wanted to kill. Such a narrow-minded swordsman was destined to be unable to achieve the supreme sword Dao. Even if he could nurture a sword heart in the future, his sword heart would definitely not be pure, and it would be easy for him to go berserk. Such a narrow-minded swordsman, I will destroy your sword Qi, so that you won't hurt others in the future. Nie Tian said in a deep voice, emitting an extremely domineering aura. You are courting death. Seeing that Nie Tian did not even put him in his eyes, Shang Mingjie was even more furious. The cyan longsword on his back slashed through the air and landed in his hand. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash also appeared in Nie Tian's hand. He did not want to give Shang Mingjie any chance. Green Lotus Slash! Shang Mingjie shouted, almost shouting out the eunuch's movement. His entire body was bursting with origin energy, and the cyan longsword shone brightly, enveloping his entire body. The sword light was shocking, condensing into a terrifying sword wave in the air, rolling with boundless killing intent, directly attacking. 300 billion sword shadows! Nie Tian's figure did not move, and he only stabbed out with his sword. Suddenly, hundreds of sword lights appeared in the air, covering the sky and covering the earth. Chapter 124. Bang! There was a loud noise in the air, and the sword shadow collided with the sword wave. All of Shang Mingjie's sword Qi was useless in front of Nie Tian. Ah! Shang Mingjie screamed as the sword shadow attacked him. His eyes were instantly replaced by extreme fear. Shang Mingjie was directly hit by the sword shadow. When his figure was still in the air, he spat out blood and his face showed a painful expression. After landing, Shang Mingjie couldn't get up for a long time. His face became extremely miserable. Finally, he burst into tears. Being defeated by Nie Tian was not enough to make Shang Mingjie cry. What made him cry was that Nie Tian destroyed his sword Qi with one move. Sword Qi. That was the sword Qi that he had spent more than 10 years to condense. Now it was destroyed by one move. How could Shang Mingjie bear such a blow? Nie Tian destroyed Shang Mingjie's sword Qi with one move. What he used was the move of AO Sword Tactics, 300 billion sword shadows. AO Sword Tactics had 3 basic moves, 3 intermediate moves, 3 advanced moves, and 3 supreme moves. In addition, it also included various sword formations. 300 billion sword shadows was one of the 3 basic moves of AO Sword Tactic. The other 2 moves were 17 swords and 1 sword overturning the night. Now Nie Tian was too weak, and he could only use the 3 basic moves of AO sword tactic. Among the 3 basic moves, 17 swords was a defensive move and the only defensive move in AO sword tactic. 300 billion sword shadows and 1 sword overturning the knight were both offensive moves. 300 billion sword shadows, as the name suggested, when practiced to the extreme, 1 sword could stab out 300 billion flowing light sword shadows, which really had the power to destroy heaven and earth. It was a pity that Nie Tian could only stab out hundreds of flowing light sword shadows with 1 sword. The gap between Shang Mingjie and Nie Tian was too big, mainly in sword chi, sword moves, and sword comprehension. Nie Tian's sword comprehension was much better than Shang Mingjie's. Even if Nie Tian only used ordinary sword moves at the moment, it was enough to defeat Shang Mingjie. Shang Mingjie was defeated by Nie Tian with 1 move and had no power to fight back. This scene completely stunned everyone. And Shang Mingjie's crying made everyone even more confused. Wasn't he just defeated? Was there a need to cry in public? Boss, why is he crying? Jean de Bao couldn't help but ask when he saw Shang Mingjie crying. Nie Tian shook his head slightly and said, I accidentally destroyed his sword chi. He couldn't accept this fact, so he cried. One careless mistake, another careless mistake. When Shang Mingjie heard the words, accidentally, again, he cried even louder. This time, even his mother couldn't coax him. Nie Tian no longer looked at Shang Mingjie. Instead, he looked at the cultivation room beside him and said with a smile, De Bao, Shang Mingjie's sword chi has already been crippled, so he probably won't be interested in the cultivation room anymore. From now on, his cultivation room will be yours. Boss, this. Hearing what Nie Tian said, not only was Jean de Bao not happy, he was instead quite frightened, and his tongue was almost unable to straighten. You don't want it? Nie Tian was slightly stunned. Jean de Bao bent down beside Nie Tian's ear and said softly, Boss, Shang Mingjie's big brother is the #1 expert in the inner courtyard, Shang Mingyu. It is said that his strength is very strong, and many teachers in the academy can't compare to him. Since you crippled Shang Mingjie, Shang Mingyu definitely won't let this matter go. Let's leave first. Nie Tian was a little surprised, then laughed. Why do we have to leave? The sword chi that I accidentally condensed has yet to find an opponent. If Shang Mingyu comes, he can test out the extent of my sword chi. Shang Mingyu. Hearing this name coming out from Nie Tian's mouth, the surrounding people were quite surprised and started discussing. Nie Tian knows that Shang Mingjie is Shang Mingyu's little brother, and still dared to cripple his sword chi. Is he tired of living? That's right. Shang Mingyu is not someone that Shang Mingjie can compare to. He is the #1 in the inner courtyard. It is said that many teachers aren't his opponent. I heard that Shang Mingyu is in closed-door training during this period of time. I heard that he is trying to nurture his sword heart. Sword heart. Tyrant Cloud Academy hasn't produced a swordsman with sword heart, right? At this time, Shang Mingjie also thought of something, and it was unknown where he got the strength to stand up, but he pointed at Nie Tian and roared, Little bastard, just you wait. My big brother is in closed-door training, and when he finishes, he will definitely take your dog life. Shang Mingyu was indeed in closed-door training, and he wasn't in Tyrant Cloud Academy at this time. Nie Tian chuckled and said, You clearly know that Shang Mingyu is in closed-door training, and you still dare to be so arrogant? Do you believe that I won't kill you right now? After saying that, Nie Tian's eyes shot out a beam of light, and his whole body released a sharp killing intent. You dare? Shang Mingjie was so frightened that he retreated abruptly, and he fell to the ground with a plop. Immediately, he felt his legs heat up, and warm liquid flowed out, and the air emitted a pungent smell of urine. Scared to the point of peeing. To everyone's surprise, Shang Mingjie, who was usually high and mighty and insufferably arrogant, had actually wet his pants. Nie Tian curled his lips and smiled, and said, I don't care that you like to be Lan Bingji's watchdog, but unfortunately, You shouldn't have bitten me. But seeing that you wet your pants, I'll be merciful and spare your dog life for the time being. Keep your eyes open next time and don't bite people randomly." After he finished speaking, Nie Tian didn't have any interest to spare Shang Mingjie another glance. Killing a person who was scared to the point of peeing his pants in public would only dirty his hands. "Boss, do you really want the cultivation room? This is Prince Binji's cultivation room." Seeing Nie Tian walk towards the cultivation room, Jean de Bao pulled Nie Tian, and the fat on his face trembled violently because of nervousness. The conflict between Nie Tian and Lan Binji had long spread throughout Tyrant Cloud Academy. If Nie Tian snatched Lan Binji's cultivation room again, wouldn't the two of them directly fight when they met again? No matter what, Lan Binji was still a prince. Could it be that Nie Tian could cripple the latter like how he crippled Shang Mingjie? Nie Tian turned around and patted Jean de Bao's shoulder, and said, "De Bao, rest assured. It's just a cultivation room. I believe Lan Binji will be very happy to give it to me." Jean de Bao was completely speechless. With Lan Binji's character, it was impossible for him to give the cultivation room to Nie Tian, and it was even more impossible for him to be very happy. But Nie Tian had already made up his mind, and Jean de Bao had no other choice but to risk his life to accompany the gentleman. Hence, under the watchful eyes of everyone, Nie Tian entered Lan Binji's cultivation room, and Jean de Bao entered Shang Mingjie's cultivation room. After Nie Tian entered the cultivation room, it was immediately sealed by a restriction. This restriction could isolate all disturbances from the outside world, unless someone forcibly broke through the restriction. When a martial artist was cultivating, their body and soul would be in a state of concentration, and the most taboo was to be disturbed. Once disturbed, especially at the critical moment of breaking through to a higher realm, there would be a risk of cultivation deviation. The restriction of the cultivation room was specially set up to prevent martial artists from being disturbed, and generally, it could only be removed from the inside. After Nie Tian walked into the cultivation room, he immediately felt an extremely heavy pressure, making him feel that his whole body was much heavier. "I didn't expect that Tyrant Cloud's cultivation room would be this good. It even has a gravity array." Nie Tian smiled faintly. Inside the cultivation room, there was not only a spirit gathering array, but also a gravity array. Chapter 125. Nie Tian sensed it for a moment and murmured, "This gravity array is not bad. It can be continuously increased. If I'm not wrong, the gravity will increase tenfold every day I stay in the cultivation room." An increase in gravity was very beneficial to a cultivator. The biggest benefit was that it could temper a cultivator's body and make it even stronger. 10 days. I'll leave after 10 days. Nie Tian smiled faintly and made up his mind. He estimated that Qiu Shan's injuries would be more or less healed in 10 days. At that time, he would be able to help heal his damaged Yuan meridians. Moreover, the gravity would increase by about 100 times after 10 days, which was basically the limit of what Nie Tian could endure. Without further delay, Nie Tian sat down cross-legged and quickly entered a state of cultivation. Nie Tian entered the primal chaos origin coffin in his consciousness space and started to circulate the 9 war god art. In the cultivation room that was rich in heaven and earth spirit energy, Nie Tian's cultivation speed was at least 3 to 4 times faster than before. As the heaven and earth spirit energy gathered, Nie Tian's body started to glow with a faint golden light. This was the golden sky armor produced by the first stage of the 9 war god art, the golden sky realm. Nie Tian could clearly sense that the spiritual power of heaven and earth was flowing through his meridians and gradually transforming into the power within them. Heaven and earth spirit energy was divided into different attributes. The same applied to a cultivator's Yuan spirit. According to the different attributes, heaven and earth spirit energy was divided into 9 major attributes: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light, and darkness. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were known as the 5 elements of earth, while wind, lightning, light, and darkness were known as the 4 elements of sky. Elemental spirits with the 5 elements were the most common. Elemental spirits with the 4 elements were rarer, especially the light and darkness attribute. However, Nyetian still did not know what attribute his primal chaos origin coffin was. He had a strange feeling that perhaps the primal chaos origin coffin did not belong to the 9 major attribute. Instead, it was an attribute that was separate from the 9 major attribute. As for what this attribute was, Nyetian still did not know. Nyetian waited until his Yuan meridians and Yuan spirit were filled to the brim with heaven and earth spiritual energy before breaking through to the next realm. After half a day, Nyetian let out a long breath of turbid air, his face revealing a satisfied smile. His strength rose another level, reaching the 6th level origin spirit realm. But Nyetian was not satisfied. He was preparing to assault the 7th level origin spirit realm. Right now, the gravity in the cultivation room was not too strong, which was more suitable for breaking through to the next realm. If the gravity in the cultivation room became stronger, it would be difficult to break through to the next realm. Spending another half a day's time, Nyetian successfully reached 7th level origin spirit strength. From the 5th level origin spirit realm to the 7th level origin spirit realm, Nyetian merely used 1 day's time. This cultivation speed could only be described as the speed of light. However, Nyetian knew that 1 day of his was equivalent to 10 days of an ordinary martial artist. Moreover, he was currently in the cultivation room, and his cultivation speed had increased by 3 to 4 times. It was almost equivalent to a month or 2 of hard work for an ordinary martial artist. Letting out a long breath, Nyetian rested for a moment. When his mental state recovered, he did not waste any more time, his divine sense entering the 10th origin veins realm domain. Inside the realm domain, the primordial star stone was akin to a stone pillar connecting heaven and earth, towering and unmoving. With the primordial star stone as the center, the realm domain origin formation slowly revolved without rest, as if creating traces of life force for this stretch of boundless heaven and earth. Power of stars, primordial star stone, 1 day I'll see through all of your secrets. Nyetian looked at the majestic heaven and earth in front of him and muttered to himself. He came under the primordial star stone and sat down cross-legged, focusing all of his mind on the seemingly far away, but in reality, even further away above the 1st level of the celestial river. Following Nyetian's comprehension in his mind, stars gradually lit up above the 1st level of the celestial river. After a moment, several dozen stars sensed it at the same time. Akin to shooting stars, they were cast onto the enormous primordial star stone. On the primordial star stone, the originally dim star spirit patterns, close to 100 were sensed, accepting the power of stars and being instantly activated. Sure enough, they've joined together. Nyetian was so excited that he suddenly stood up. His eyes followed the direction of the primordial star stone, and saw that the newly activated star spirit patterns and the original star spirit patterns had joined together, forming a long line. The long arc was very much like the tip of an iceberg of an unusually grand painting. Feeling this way, Nyetian could more clearly understand the inconceivable nature of the primordial star stone. This feeling was like being in a vast and boundless space, and he himself occupied a very small part of this endless space, like a drop of water in the ocean, a grain of dust in the desert. So insignificant, so indiscernible. Nyetian was shocked. He had long guessed that the primordial star stone most likely contained a very terrifying star totem. And these activated star power were bits and pieces of the star totem. He could even feel that there was an immeasurable power hidden under the star totem, which was absolutely a terrible existence that no other power could compare to. The star totem seems to have the same wonderful effect as the star spirit. It's just that it's grander, more complex, and more mysterious. If I can awaken enough star power, I might be able to activate the power contained in the star totem. Nie Tian nodded heavily, his heart extremely excited. It was hard to imagine that a small star spirit pattern already contained such a terrifying power. Then, on the primordial star stone, there was an enormous star spirit that seemed to connect heaven and earth. What kind of power did it contain? It was definitely a power that could destroy heaven and earth. After fantasizing for a while, Nie Tian's mind returned to a more concrete problem. He carefully counted the star power of each star on the primordial star stone. After a while, Nie Tian got the answer. Right now, he had awakened a total of 128 star power. A total of 128 star power. Nie Tian's face revealed an incomparably excited expression. Previously, he had only awakened 32 star power, but the power in his hands had already reached 50,000 Jin. Now that the star power had multiplied by several times, the power in his hands was definitely more than 50,000 Jin. A force of 100,000 Jin, even an ordinary all-creations warrior would find it difficult to achieve. Nie Tian felt that his whole body was bursting with power. Compared to a day ago, his combat power had at least doubled. It seems that I can only awaken this much star power. The power of the star totem is still too early. I should leave the Star River precinct first. It's time to carve the star spirit. Nie Tian was very satisfied with the increase in his strength. With a proud smile, he directly left the Star River precinct. His divine sense once again appeared in his soul space. This time, Nie Tian was ready to carve the star spirit. At this time, he suddenly found that his spiritual power had also increased, rising by one level, reaching the 41st level. The higher the level, the harder it was to increase the spiritual power. Those alchemists, blacksmiths, and spiritual array masters all desperately cultivated their spiritual power, but they may not be as fast as Nie Tian. Okay, it's time to look at the third page of the original Star Spirit Tome. Nie Tian was extremely excited. Finally, he was going to open the third page of the original Star Spirit Tome. The original Star Spirit Tome. Previously, Nie Tian could only open the introduction and the second page. The original Star Spirit Tome indicated that one's strength had to reach the 5th level of the Essence Spirit Realm to be able to open the third page. Nie Tian's previous strength was already at the 5th level of the Essence Spirit Realm, but he did not have the time to look at the third page. Chapter 126. The Star Soul Original Opus slowly flipped open. On the third page, 12 Star Soul diagrams were flickering. Holy shit! And it's a first-level astral soul? As Nie Tian stared at the 12 astral soul diagrams, he couldn't help but feel a tinge of disappointment as he involuntarily cursed. Initially, he was still hoping that a second-level astral soul would appear on this page. But to his disappointment, it was still a first-level astral soul. However, the astral souls on this page were much more complicated than the ones on the second page. Not only that, the astral energy within the astral souls was also much denser, and contained even more profound and intricate array runes. Nie Tian swept his gaze across all the astral soul diagrams as he involuntarily shook his head. He estimated that with his current strength, if he wanted to inscribe these astral soul diagrams, even the simplest one would require at least 5 to 6 days of time. In order to inscribe an astral soul, one could only use astral energy to inscribe it. Naturally, one would also need a powerful mental energy to support it. Currently, the amount of astral energy Nie Tian could control was much greater than before. However, it wasn't easy for him to inscribe an astral soul on the third page. Glancing at it, the third page contained the most complicated astral souls, which were at least several times more intricate compared to the previous page. Not only that, the difficulty of inscribing these astral souls had also increased by tens of times. Based on his current strength, if he wanted to inscribe these astral souls, he would require at least a month's time. A month's time is too terrifying. I don't have that much time. Nye Tian shook his head with a bitter smile on his face, before finally locking his gaze onto the simplest astral soul. The astral soul that Nye Tian was paying attention to was an illusory armor known as the Flame Demon Armor. There aren't many complicated areas in this astral soul, and the inscriptions on it can be considered exquisite. Not bad. Nye Tian smiled, but then sighed. The biggest flaw is that the Flame Demon Armor seems to be a defense-type astral soul. I prefer astral souls that take the initiative to attack. Nye Tian decided that he would first inscribe the Flame Demon's armor. If there was still time, he would inscribe the remaining astral souls on the second page. The astral souls on the second page were relatively simpler. With Nye Tian's current strength, it was extremely easy for him to inscribe. He should be able to inscribe one astral soul within a day. With the plan set in his heart, Nye Tian didn't waste any more time and immediately immersed himself in the process of inscribing his astral soul. Nye Tian circulated his 10th origin meridian. Threads of star energy were like sharp blades that carved stroke by stroke on the primal chaos origin coffin. With his previous experience, Nye Tian was much more adept at carving. However, there were still many details that required him to waste a large amount of mental energy and star power. The process of inscribing an astral soul was extremely complicated. Every strand of astral energy had to be just right. It couldn't be too heavy or too light. Luckily, Nye Tian's mental energy far surpassed that of ordinary people. If not, he definitely wouldn't be able to inscribe even a single astral soul. Just as Nye Tian was fully focused on inscribing his astral souls, something was happening outside the training room. After the first day, Jean de Bao came out of the cultivation room and found that Nye Tian was still in the cultivation room. He did not find it strange. Many people would cultivate in the cultivation room for a long time, usually staying for 3 to 5 days before coming out. Because of the fiend god blood scripture, Jean de Bao did not have the mood to cultivate. Hence, he came out on the first day. Ever since he awakened the fiend god blood scripture, his cultivation had been stagnating at the first level of the essence spirit realm. Hence, to him, cultivation did not have much attraction. Jean Mingxin invited all the alchemists in Blue Cloud City to treat Jean de Bao. However, not a single one of them could see anything wrong. Everyone said that there was no problem with Jean de Bao's astral soul. However, the problem was that no matter how Jean de Bao cultivated, there was no improvement in his cultivation. Jean de Bao had basically resigned himself to his fate. In this lifetime, his cultivation was basically fixed at the first level of the essence spirit realm. 3 days later, Jean de Bao came to the cultivation room again. He found that Nye Tian had still not come out. At this time, the news of Nye Tian crippling Shang Mingjie's sword qi had already spread throughout the entire Tyrant Cloud Academy. However, what made Jean de Bao feel strange was that Lan Binji did not appear in the cultivation room. Even when his cultivation room was snatched by Nye Tian, he did not have any reaction. Could it be that Prince Binji is really afraid? He willingly gave up the cultivation room to boss? Jean de Bao felt strange in his heart, but he was more worried about Nye Tian at this time. He had already stayed in the cultivation room for 4 days. The cultivation room's gravity had already increased to 40 times. 40 times gravity was not what ordinary people could endure. The cultivation room was separated from the outside world by restrictions. Jean de Bao did not know what happened to Nye Tian and could only worry helplessly. Jean de Bao knew that Nye Tian's physique was far stronger than ordinary martial artists. It was definitely not an issue for him to endure 40 times gravity. Hence, he was not particularly worried either. In a twinkle, another 3 days passed. Jean de Bao came to the cultivation room once more and was already anxious like an ant on a hot pan. His fat face swelled up explosively again. It's been 7 days. Why hasn't boss come out yet? Jean de Bao was anxious in his heart and wished that he could forcefully break open the cultivation room's restrictions. Sadly, he did not have this strength. 7 days. That meant that the cultivation room's gravity had already increased to a horrifying 70 times. The pressure of 70 times gravity. Normally, only giant spirit realm martial artists could endure it. Jean Ming, what's the Academy's longest cultivation record? Jean de Bao suddenly asked Jean Ming beside him. Jean Ming's expression froze for a long time. He swallowed hard and said, 7 days. To date, the longest cultivation record in Tyrant Cloud Academy was 7 days. And Nye Tian just happened to have stayed in the cultivation room for 7 days already. 7 days. Jean de Bao immediately felt his head explode. He immediately asked, what's that person's strength? It seems to be 9th level Wanxiang. Jean Ming's tongue was already stuttering. 9th level Wanxiang. Jean de Bao sucked in a breath of cold air. He remembered that when Nye Tian entered the cultivation room, his strength was merely at the 5th level origin spirit realm. He was a full 1.5 major realm away from that person who held the longest cultivation record. Something won't happen, right? Jean de Bao's heart pounded. In the past, there had been cases of students dying in the cultivation room too. After all, cultivation rooms were rare. Some people were obsessed with cultivation and wanted to challenge their limit. In the end, they were crushed to death by the strong gravity of the cultivation room. No, I have to hurry and find Principal Qi. Jean de Bao no longer hesitated and hurried to find Qi Feng. Jean Ming grabbed him and said, Young Master Jean, Principal Qi is in closed-door cultivation. You won't be able to find him. Oh no! Jean de Bao suddenly remembered that Qi Feng happened to be in closed-door cultivation a few days ago and wasn't in the academy right now. What should we do now? Jean de Bao's forehead was dripping with sweat, and chills ran down his back. Rui Qianyu definitely wouldn't be able to be found. Qi Feng was in closed-door cultivation, and only Fan Jinwu was left. He definitely wouldn't help. Even if Jean de Bao told Jean Mingxin about this, the latter wouldn't be able to do anything. After all, this was a matter of Tyrant Cloud Academy. No matter how great Jean Mingxin's influence was, he couldn't interfere with Tyrant Cloud Academy's matters. Young Master Jean, let's continue waiting. Boss Nye Tian's strength is freakish. He'll definitely be fine. Jean Ming wiped his sweat and comforted. We can only continue waiting. Jean de Bao let out a long sigh, a helpless look on his face. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. Today was already the 10th day since Nye Tian entered the cultivation room. The 10th day. The gravity in the cultivation room had already soared to a shocking 100 times. Chapter 127. At this moment, a large number of people had gathered in the cultivation field, surrounding Nye Tian's cultivation room so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. The matter of Nye Tian entering the cultivation room for 10 days had already caused a sensation in Tyrant Cloud Academy. The onlookers were all students, not a single teacher of the academy. Logically speaking, with such a sensational event happening in the academy, it was very unreasonable that not a single teacher had come. Jean de Bao knew that Fan Jinwu and Lan Binji were behind this. Now, most people thought that something must have happened to Nye Tian. The longer he stayed in the cultivation room, the higher the probability of him dying. Outside the cultivation room, there was an uproar. Nye Tian has already been in there for 10 days. The gravity in the cultivation room has increased to 100 times. That's a full 100 times. Even a giant spirit realm martial artist can't withstand that kind of pressure. Something must have happened. Maybe he's already been crushed into meat paste. What a pity, Nye Tian is the freshman king of the academy. I heard that Nye Tian once fought with the commander of the Imperial Guards, Lord Qin Yetian. Maybe he can really withstand 100 times the gravity. Bulsh *T. That's 100 times the gravity. Even the academy's teachers can't withstand it. Everyone spoke one after another. Most people were sure that Nye Tian had already died in the cultivation room. Jean de Bao stood outside the cultivation room, his whole body drenched in cold sweat, his clothes drenched. He had not told Jin Mingxin and the rest, nor did he tell Qiu Shan and Qiu Ling. In fact, even if he told them, it would be useless. It would just be a futile worry. Young Master Jin, how is teacher? At this time, a figure squeezed over in a panic. It was Zhang Yifeng. Zhang Yifeng had inadvertently learned about the matter of Tyrant Cloud Academy and immediately rushed over. It's Master Zhang Yifeng. Nye Tian is Master Zhang Yifeng's teacher. Looks like Master Zhang Yifeng is going to suffer the pain of losing his teacher. Watch your mouth. Don't talk nonsense. If Master Zhang Yifeng hears it, you'll have to bear the consequences. Zhang Yifeng's arrival caused a commotion. Zhang Yifeng ignored the voices around him and looked at the cultivation room nervously. Jean de Bao shook his head helplessly. How many days has teacher been in the cultivation room? Zhang Yifeng asked. 10 days. Jean de Bao had a pained expression as he cursed. Damn that Jin Ming. I sent him to look for a teacher in the academy, but he still hasn't returned. Young Master Jin. Just as Jean de Bao finished cursing, Jin Ming squeezed through the crowd, his forehead covered in sweat. Jin Ming, where's the teacher I asked you to find? Jean de Bao grabbed Jin Ming, but he didn't see any teacher. Jin Ming shook his head helplessly and said dejectedly, none of the teachers came. They all said they had something to do. Damn it. A bunch of bastards. Jean de Bao did not care about anything else and directly cursed. These teachers must have received Fan Jinji's message and turned a blind eye to Nye Tian's matter. Qi Feng was currently in seclusion. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have reached this step. Whatever. I'm going to break the cultivation room's restrictive spell by force, Zhang Yifeng said anxiously. He stepped forward to the cultivation room's entrance, trying to break the restrictive spell by force. You dare. Right at this moment, a furious roar sounded out. It was like rolling thunder, intimidating everyone. Immediately after, the crowd automatically opened up a path, and a young man walked over with large strides. The man looked to be about 20 years old. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His face was cold and stern, and his gaze was stern. Oh my God! He's the #1 person in the inner court, Shang Mingyu. It's really Shang Mingyu. I heard that his younger brother, Shang Mingjie, had his sword chi crippled by Nye Tian 10 days ago. I wonder if it's true. It's absolutely true. When Nye Tian crippled Shang Mingjie's sword chi, I was at the side and saw it with my own eyes. Nye Tian only used one sword strike to make Shang Mingjie piss his pants. Then it's over. Shang Mingyu is definitely here for revenge. There was a commotion in the surroundings, and the atmosphere suddenly became oppressive. Shang Mingyu took a step forward and directly stopped Zhang Yifeng. He glared at the latter and had no intention of moving aside. You dare to stop me? Zhang Yifeng was slightly taken aback and immediately rebuked. Do you know who I am? Zhang Yifeng was very famous in Blue Cloud City. Many big shots had to lower their heads and show some respect when they saw him. Now that he was blocked by a rash brat who came out of nowhere, he was very angry. Shang Mingyu glanced at Zhang Yifeng and said cold, Master Zhang Yifeng, this is Tyrant Cloud Academy. You want to forcefully break the cultivation room's restriction. As a student of Tyrant Cloud Academy, of course I have to stop you. Shang Mingyu had just finished his seclusion and heard the grievous news that his younger brother's sword chi was crippled. Of course, he wouldn't let this matter go. Not to mention that the person in front of him was Zhang Yifeng, even if it was the Emperor of Blue Cloud City. He wouldn't take a step back. You! Zhang Yifeng was infuriated. His face turned slightly red and immediately turned cold. He said, What if I insist on breaking the cultivation room's restriction? Then don't blame me for being impolite. Shang Mingyu's body shook. A small golden sword appeared in between his eyebrows. Immediately, surging sword qi spread out. Everyone couldn't bear the pressure of the powerful sword qi and retreated. Zhang Yifeng suddenly sensed something. He frowned and said in surprise, "You have nurtured sword heart?" Shang Mingyu sneered and said, "Master Zhang has some knowledge. To be able to see that I have nurtured sword heart. That's right. I have already nurtured sword heart. That's why I advise Master Zhang, don't look for trouble. Otherwise, under my sword heart, there won't be anyone left alive." Shang Mingyu was very domineering. He was actually directly threatening Zhang Yifeng. Zhang Yifeng didn't retreat. He said coldly, "You dare to kill me?" He was a third-ranked alchemist and possessed the alchemist badge. He was protected by the Alchemist Association. If Shang Mingyu dared to kill him, it would be bringing a disaster to himself and the entire Shang clan. "You can try." Shang Mingyu actually took a step forward. His eyes shot out flames of fury. His entire body was filled with killing intent. "Jin Ming, immediately go to Jin residence and call my father over. Tell him that something big has happened. Ask him to hurry over." Jin Debao saw that the situation wasn't good. He pulled Jin Ming out and told him to look for Jin Mingxin. Jin Ming agreed and turned to leave. Courting death. Shang Mingyu screamed when he saw Jin Ming leaving. Immediately, two sharp sword qi tore through the air. Crack! Crack! In the next moment, two sounds of bones breaking could be heard. Jin Ming's knees exploded. Fresh blood spurted out. "Ah! My legs!" Jin Ming, who had just run 2 steps, let out a hysterical howl. His knees went soft and he fell to the ground. Both his kneecaps were broken. "Jin Ming!" Jin Debao saw this scene and shouted loudly. He sprinted over. "Young Master Jin, my legs are crippled!" Jin Ming screamed. The pain from his knees made him cry. But the blow of his legs being crippled made him feel even more despair. Everyone subconsciously retreated, maintaining a distance from Shang Mingyu. Shang Mingyu was too ruthless. He actually crippled Jin Ming's knees. Chapter 128. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, looking at Shang Mingyu in horror. And in the crowd, Lan Binji and Qin Yuhu quietly hid, looking at the scene before them complacently. "Nye Tian, ah, Nye Tian, never would have thought that this prince wanted to kill you at all costs. Who knew that you were so foolish, actually playing yourself to death? After all, just a country bumpkin. Probably never seen a cultivation room in this lifetime. Little trash wanted to overturn the heavens. Death is not to be pitied." The corners of Lan Binji's mouth curled up sinisterly, feeling extremely pleased in his heart. In his eyes, Nye Tian was just a poor lad who popped out from God knows where. The first time he entered a cultivation room, he was too agitated, and in the end, he died inside. If not for being in a public place at this moment, Lan Binji would definitely be laughing hysterically. Qin Yuhu was very happy too. Who could have thought that Nye Tian would actually die in such a manner? Everyone was certain that Nye Tian already died inside the cultivation room. Perhaps even the corpse would be smelly already. Inside the cultivation room, Nye Tian was naturally still alive. Furthermore, he was living very well. After his strength rose to the 7th level origin spirit realm, Nye Tian started to focus on inscribing astral souls. He spent a whole 5 days and finally inscribed the flame demon armor. In the remaining time, Nye Tian naturally did not idle but busied himself with inscribing the 2nd page of astral souls. The 2nd page's astral souls were clearly simpler than the 3rd page's astral souls. Therefore, inscribing each astral soul did not spend too much time on Nye Tian. He used 3 days' time and easily inscribed 3 astral souls: Flowing Leaf 7 Murders, Origin Reversing Netherblade, Dragon Raising Arms. Adding in the Flame Demon Armor, there were a total of 4 astral souls on Nye Tian's Chaos Original Coffin. 4 astral souls were sufficient for Nie Tian to deal with any danger. When time entered the 10th day, Nie Tian clearly felt the gravitational pressure becoming more obvious. It's already 100 times the gravitational pressure. Even a giant spirit realm martial artist would find it hard to withstand this kind of pressure too. Fortunately, I have the 9 Extremes War God Arts Golden Extreme Yellow Heaven Battle Armor, and the power of 128 stars in my body. Otherwise, even I would not be able to withstand such pressure, Nie Tian muttered to himself. 100 times the gravitational pressure, this was already the limit that Nie Tian could withstand at the moment. Although he only had 7th level origin spirit strength right now, his physique was comparable to giant spirit realm martial artists. He was absolutely an unkillable cockroach level. It's time to practice the AO sword tactic. In the practice room, Nie Tian stood up and felt that his breathing was a little uneven. On the path of the sword Dao, sword moves and sword techniques were completely dependent on the swordsman's comprehension. It was a competition of sword Dao aptitude. Therefore, Nie Tian was able to skip the 2 realms of sword moves and sword techniques and directly enter the realm of sword energy. However, after entering the sword chi realm, the swordsman would need to use sword chi to nurture the sword heart. This was a relatively slow and arduous process. Not only did it require the support of sword Dao talent, but it also required the slow accumulation of sword chi. Without accumulating sword chi to a certain degree, it would be impossible to nurture the sword heart. Just like a seed sprouting, it was impossible to break through the soil without enough nutrition. Sword chi was the nutrition and soil needed to nurture a sword heart. Under 100 times the gravitational environment, the sword moves that Nie Tian performed became heavier and slower. But under such extreme pressure, it was very helpful for the accumulation of sword chi. Nie Tian could clearly feel the sword chi in his dantian becoming denser and denser. He had 2 kinds of sword chi in. This was unprecedented. Even though Nie Tian in his previous life was already a monstrous genius in the sword Dao, he had never heard of a swordsman who could condense 2 kinds of sword chi at the same time. 2 kinds of sword chi. One was the proud sword chi produced by the proud sword art. The other was produced by the 10th origin vein Star Soul Primordial Stone. Nie Tian named the second kind of sword chi as Star Soul Sword Chi. What surprised him the most was that the proud sword chi and Star Soul sword chi could be perfectly fused together, and the power after fusion was far greater than ordinary sword chi. This was also the main reason why Nie Tian was able to destroy Shang Mingjie with one sword move. Proud sword chi and Star Soul sword chi, as long as I can make both kinds of sword chi reach the realm of sword profound. Just with the strength of the sword Dao, it is enough for me to dominate the heaven realm. Nie Tian thought so in his heart, and couldn't help but show a comfortable smile on his face. In his previous life, Nie Tian was already at the realm of sword profound. But the heaven realm also had swordsmen who were on par with him. Limitless Sword Saint Emo Qianjun, Western Sword Emperor Jiu Qianxing, Dongchuan Sword Evil Duguanai, North Sea Sword Lord Guihen, plus Day and Night Proud Sword Nie Tian. The 5 people were known as the 5 peaks of the heaven realm sword Dao. The strength of the first 4 people was not inferior to Nie Tian. However, once Nie Tian mastered 2 types of sword profundities, he would be able to suppress these freaks with ease. Nie Tian was sweating profusely after he finished a set of sword movements of the 3 primary styles of the AO sword tactic. Under the pressure of this 100 times gravity, even he felt very uncomfortable. It's time to leave. Nie Tian put away the sword Absolute Heaven Slash, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and prepared to leave the training room. At the same time, outside the training room, Shang Mingyu, what are you doing? Jin Ming's legs were crippled by Shang Mingyu. Jin Debao was unable to restrain his anger. He roared and his eyes almost spewed fire. Shang Mingyu looked at Jin Debao cold, seemed to remember something and said, You are the young master of the Jin family? So what? Jin Debao clenched his fist, almost fighting with Shang Mingyu. Jin Ming was also a member of the Jin family, and he was crippled in public. Jin Debao couldn't swallow this anger. What's your relationship with Nye Tian inside? Shang Mingyu raised his eyebrows and asked coldly. Nye Tian is my boss. Jin Debao shouted. I know you want to avenge Shang Mingyu. You can't wait for my boss to die in the training room, right? He crippled my brother's sword chi, damn it. Shang Mingyu almost squeezed out the last two words from his teeth. Damn it. Jin Debao couldn't care less anymore and scolded. Are the people of the Shang family all cowards? Your brother is a waste. His sword chi was crippled by my boss with one move. You are a coward. You only know how to use this kind of despicable means. If you have the ability, let my boss come out. I promise you can't even take one move from him. Fatty. Shut up. Shang Mingyu was scolded in public, and his sword chi became even sharper. The terrifying killing intent almost condensed into a substance, making people suffocate. You told me to shut up, but I can't. Jin Debao scolded angrily. How could he stop, and scolded even more arrogantly. You, Shang Mingyu, are called the number one in the inner courtyard, but you are actually a coward who only knows how to use despicable means. Trash like you can only use some tricks behind the scenes. If you fight my boss head-on, you will definitely be beaten to the point where you can't even put on your pants. Ah! Shang Mingyu was completely enraged by Jin Debao. He roared crazily, and his sword chi was filled with terrifying killing intent. He shouted, Jin Debao, you're courting death. Golden Sun Sword Art, Single Star Strike. With a desperate roar, the sword on Shang Mingyu's back was unsheathed, and the sword pointed at Jin Debao. A terrifying sword chi rolled out, straight towards Jin Debao's chest. Chapter 129. Shang Mingyu sent Jin Debao flying with one strike, and the entire place became deathly silent. Who was Jin Debao? Jin Mingxin's only son. Who was Jin Mingxin? The president of the Blue Cloud Merchant Association. He controlled almost half of the empire's asset. More importantly, the Blue Cloud Merchant Association was backed by the Martial Merchant Association. Although many people had never heard of the Martial Merchant Association, it was an organization not weaker than the Alchemist Association. With these connections, Jin Debao's status was indescribably noble, even comparable to a prince. If he died in Shang Mingyu's hands, Jin Mingxin would definitely be furious. At that time, the entire Shang clan would not be able to bear Jin Mingxin's anger. Unfortunately, Shang Mingyu was already furious, and did not have the time to think so much. Jin Debao, you can die. Who asked you to be so loyal to Nye Tian? Lan Binji looked at Jin Debao on the ground, his heart pounding in agitation. Jin Debao was dead anyway, and Jin Mingxin could only blame it on the Shang clan. It had nothing to do with Lan Binji. Jin Debao, die. Qin Yuhu was even more excited, his heart jumping to his throat. Jin clan and Qin clan did not have a good relationship to begin with, and Qin Yuhu was even more disgusted with Jin Debao. Coward, is that all you've got? Just as everyone was shocked, Jin Debao miraculously stood up, and was not seriously injured. There was only a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath. Who would have thought that Jin Debao actually did not die after taking a blow from Shang Mingyu head-on? Shang Mingyu was at the 5th level of the Wanxiang realm, and a martial artist who specialized in the sword Dao. His body had already nurtured the heart of the sword, and his attack power was very strong. Although it was not comparable to a giant spirit realm martial artist, it was not far off. And Jin Debao? The famous trash of Tyrant Cloud Academy, his strength stagnated for many years, and he was still at the 1st level of the origin spirit realm. Even if one used their toes to think, it was impossible for Jin Debao to be alive. Damn it! It's the Golden Thunder battle armor. At this time, Qin Yuhu suddenly understood and stamped his feet in anger. Humph! Lan Binji looked at Qin Yuhu cold, because Jean de Bao's Golden Thunder battle armor was one from the Qin family. Qin Yuhu had guessed correctly. Jean de Bao had indeed relied on the Golden Thunder battle armor to survive. The Golden Thunder battle armor was a Tier 4 spirit artifact. It could withstand the attack of a giant spirit realm martial artist. That was why Shang Mingyu's sword just now could not claim his life. If not for the Golden Lightning battle armor, Jean de Bao would already be a pile of minced meat. You're courting death. When Shang Mingyu saw that Jean de Bao was still alive, he was instantly enraged. He completely lost his reason and swung his sword again. Sword chi enveloped the surrounding tens of meters, almost suffocating everyone. Die! Without the slightest hesitation, Shang Mingyu once again stabbed out with his sword, aiming for Jean de Bao's throat. Cold. In an instant, Jean de Bao felt a bone-piercing chill. It was as if his entire body had lost all feeling and he couldn't move at all. Shang Mingyu mustered all his strength and went all out. He was determined to kill with one strike. Die! As he struck out with his sword, a murderous sword chi filled the air with a majestic aura, pressing down on Jean de Bao. If this strike hit Jean de Bao, he would die without a doubt. However, at this time, a strange change occurred. Stop! A familiar roar suddenly sounded. Want to kill my brother? In your dreams. A figure sprinted out of the cultivation room, his feet moving in a strange footwork, the figure leaping high into the air. Boss! Jean de Bao's eyes slightly widened as he saw a figure appear in midair. At the critical moment, the figure that appeared was none other than Ye Tian. Dodge! While the figure was still in the air, the absolute heaven slash already appeared in Ye Tian's hand. He struck out with his sword and shouted, one sword collapsing the night. When the sword struck out, the sky was instantly filled with sword shadows, dazzling and eye-catching. Kill! A deep roar sounded and a strange scene appeared. All the sword shadows in the air instantly converged into a several meters long flowing light sword, turning into a stream of light and shooting out like lightning. PFFF! A crisp sound pierced through the air. The flowing light sword flew past, and all of Shang Mingyu's sword chi dissipated in the air. Nye Tian landed steadily on the ground. Seeing that Jean de Bao was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. Boss! Seeing Nye Tian again, Jean de Bao burst into tears. Teacher! Zhang Yifeng was also very emotional and wanted to kneel down again, but he was stopped by Nye Tian. Everyone stared at Nye Tian with their mouths agape, completely dumbfounded. Especially Lan Binji and Qin Yuhu, their donkey eyes stared at Nye Tian, not daring to believe the scene in front of them. 10 days. A whole 10 days. Nye Tian stayed in the cultivation room for 10 days and actually came out unscathed. Not only would Lan Binji and the others not believe it, even ordinary people wouldn't believe it. Oh my god! It's Nye Tian, he's actually still alive. It's really Nye Tian, he's actually completely fine. And his strength has even become stronger. He stayed in the cultivation room for 10 days. My dear father, how did he do it? After a long time, everyone finally reacted, and a wave of exclamations and sounds of saliva being swallowed could be heard. Nye Tian naturally didn't care about these people's reactions. He didn't even know that he had unintentionally broken the Tyrant Cloud Academy's longest cultivation record. De Bao, are you alright? Nye Tian couldn't help but ask when he saw Jean de Bao's dazed and pale face. Ah! Jean de Bao reacted and hurriedly shook his head. I'm fine, I'm fine. Nye Tian looked at Jean de Bao, and seemed to vaguely sense that there was an extremely restless energy surging in the latter's body. However, seeing that Jean de Bao was indeed fine, he didn't pay much attention to it. Teacher, are you alright? Zhang Yifeng walked over and sized up Nye Tian, as though he was making sure that Nye Tian wasn't injured. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, What could happen to me? wasn't it just casually cultivating? Casually cultivating? Nie Tian's words immediately shocked a large number of people. Boss, how is this casually cultivating? You're cultivating with your life on the line. De Bao, what's going on? After confirming that Jean de Bao was fine, Nie Tian swept his gaze over everyone present, and finally his gaze landed on Shang Mingyu as he asked lightly. Jean de Bao calmed down and said, Boss, he's Shang Mingjia's big brother, Shang Mingyu. Shang Mingjia's big brother? Nie Tian was slightly stunned, and it took him a long time to recall who Shang Mingjia was, and then he teased, Looks like you're here to take revenge for Shang Mingjia. You're Nie Tian? Shang Mingyu only recovered from his shock at this moment, and he stared blankly at Nie Tian, unable to wrap his head around it. At this time, he finally knew why Shang Mingjia's sword chi would be crippled by Nie Tian's one-sword move. It was because Nie Tian's strength was too strong until it made him wary. His sword move just now was very domineering, but Nie Tian just casually swung his sword and broke all of his sword chi, appearing very effortlessly and casually. Shang Mingyu really could not figure out how a martial artist, who was only at the 7th level origin spirit realm, could possibly erupt with such terrifying power. The move that Nie Tian used just now was one sword collapsing the night, the same as Sword 17 and Sword Shadow 300 billion, all one of the AO Sword Arts elementary level 3 moves. Chapter 130. Nie Tian looked at Shang Mingyu and was slightly stunned. You have cultivated the sword heart? With just a casual glance, Nie Tian could see that Shang Mingyu had cultivated the sword heart. Although there was only one realm difference between the sword chi realm and the sword heart realm, there was a world of difference. After a swordsman cultivated the sword heart, the sword chi would be greatly enhanced and might even condense into a substance. In the case of the same level, a swordsman with the sword heart was more than several times stronger than a swordsman without the sword heart. Shang Mingyu cultivated the sword heart and his strength was a few realms higher than Shang Mingjia, so his real battle power was far beyond Shang Mingjia. Shang Mingjia was stunned and asked, How do you know? He did not reveal the sword heart, so how did Nie Tian know that he had cultivated the sword heart? I want to know, and I know. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his whole body exuding strong confidence. You're courting death. Shang Mingyu screamed and actually attacked the next moment. He realized that Nie Tian was a terrible opponent, and he had to take the initiative to have the confidence to win. Golden Sun Sword Art, Double Sun Devouring Cloud. Shang Mingyu stabbed out with his sword, and the terrible sword chi was like a thick cloud, sweeping over, and actually condensing into a big bloody mouth in the air, blasting towards Nie Tian. One sword falling the night. Nie Tian was not surprised, and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash was used again, and it was the same move. The sword swept a few meters away, and a flowing light sword shadow flew out in the air. Bang! The sword chi of the two sides collided, and it was like a real collision, bursting out a dull loud sound. Immediately, an almost visible wave of air spread out, and Nie Tian and Shang Mingyu felt a strong impact, and at the same time they retreated. Nie Tian took a few steps back, and actually almost fell. The sword chi of a swordsman with the sword heart was really strong, and in a head-on collision, Nie Tian was slightly inferior. On the other hand, Shang Mingyu took 3 steps back and stood still. In the first head-on collision, Shang Mingyu firmly had the upper hand. However, there was no joy on his face. Instead, there was endless anger and shock. He was at the 5th tier of the Wanxiang tier, which was almost a major tier higher than Nie Tian. Moreover, he had even developed a sword heart. Under such an advantageous situation, he was actually unable to kill his opponent with a full-powered attack. In fact, he did not even manage to injure his opponent severely. To him, this was simply a humiliation. Nie Tian steadied his body and a solemn expression appeared on his face. After all, Shang Mingyu was someone who possessed the heart of the sword, while Nie Tian was only at the sword chi realm. Even though his sword qi was far stronger than Shang Mingyu's sword qi, he could not face the latter's heart of the sword head-on. At this moment the entire place was dead silent. Countless pairs of eyes were staring at Nie Tian. No words could express the shock in their hearts. Everyone in Tyrant Cloud Academy knew that Shang Mingyu was the #1 person in the Inner Academy, and he could be said to be an outstanding figure of the Imperial City's younger generation. However, someone as powerful as Shang Mingyu was actually unable to defeat Nie Tian. This was simply like a dream. Nie Tian just entered the academy. During the freshman martial meet, his strength was about the same as Prince Binji. Now, he can actually fight Shang Mingyu head-on. This is too inconceivable. Shang Mingyu is the #1 person in the Inner Academy. I heard that many teachers are not a match for him. Nie Tian is really a monster. He persisted in the cultivation room for 10 days and fought Shang Mingyu the moment he came out. Monstrous to the point of making one's hair stand on end. Everyone whispered to each other and discussed in low voices. At the side, Lan Binji's face was swollen from anger, and he breathed heavily through his nose. Although he was arrogant, he also knew that his strength was completely not on the same level as Shang Mingyu. Just during the freshman martial meet, Nie Tian was still at the same level of battle as him. In a short 10 days, Nie Tian could actually compete with Shang Mingyu. This kind of cultivation speed, if he did not see it with his own eyes, he would simply be unable to believe it. Nie Tian, who the hell are you? Lan Binji roared in his heart, his handsome face revealing traces of malevolence. The stronger the strength Nie Tian displayed, the more afraid Lan Binji was. Nie Tian, this prince must kill you, no matter what price I have to pay. Lan Binji's heart was filled with killing intent. If he could not kill Nie Tian, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back, a fishbone stuck in his throat. He would not be able to eat well or sleep well. Qin Yu, who sensed Lan Binji's killing intent, and a hint of a smile flashed across his mouth. He hooted in his heart, Lan Binji, be angry. Only when you are angry can you take revenge for my third brother. Qin Yu was naturally happy to see the conflict between Nie Tian and Lan Binji escalate. Only this way, Qin Yulong's revenge could be avenged. Right now, it was impossible to take revenge on Nie Tian with just the Qin family's strength. Shang Mingyu heard the voices of the people around him, and his heart became even angrier. To think that he, the dignified #1 in the inner courtyard, could not even take care of a new student, it was really a disgrace. Nie Tian, the next move will take your life. Shang Mingyu's eyes were bloodshot, and his rationality was completely replaced by anger, turning him into a pure killing weapon. Gold Sun Sword Art, 3 Sun Raging Flow. With a roar, a silver longsword appeared behind Shang Mingyu, suffused with a cold light, and the sword light spread out 5 meters. Is he going to use the sword spirit? Nie Tian frowned. The silver longsword that appeared behind Shang Mingyu was obviously his original spirit. The silver longsword was called Flowing Silver Sword, and it was Shang Mingyu's original spirit. Nie Tian glanced at Flowing Silver Sword, but shook his head slightly. Flowing Silver Sword was obviously of the water attribute, and Shang Mingyu's Gold Sun Sword Art was of the fire and metal attributes. The sword art and the sword spirit did not match, and even countered each other, so Shang Mingyu could not bring out the true power of the Gold Sun Sword Art. Go to hell! Shang Mingyu roared in anger, and the flowing silver sword's blade surged with 3 terrifying sword qi, like 3 swift and fierce spirit beasts, rushing towards Nie Tian. When everyone saw Shang Mingyu's imposing manner, their hearts suddenly turned cold, and in their hearts, they were already imagining the scene of Nie Tian being directly blown away or even smashed to pieces. Shang Mingyu's imposing manner was indeed very strong, but it was a pity that it was nothing in the eyes of Nie Tian, it was just a facade. More imposing manner, but not enough power, it's just for show. Nie Tianling sneered, and the 10 yuan meridians in his body revolved at the same time. The fierce yuan qi was like a river bursting through a dam, and the sword light of the sword absolute heaven slash shot out, spreading out 10 meters. It was even more terrifying than Shang Mingyu's. One sword turning the night. It was the same move again. The sword absolute heaven slash stabbed out, and the sword light condensed into a 10-meter-long sword shadow in the air. Like a giant beast, it pounced towards Shang Mingyu. At this moment, the 3-sword qi that Shang Mingyu burst out suddenly strangely merged into one, releasing a suffocating aura of the sword qi, almost condensing into a substance. Bang! The extreme moves collided, and the space actually shook. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, the limestone slabs on the ground received the impact of the ferocious qi wave, and pieces of it shattered, turning into crushed stones and flew in all directions. Nie Tian and Shang Mingyu simultaneously felt an extremely strong impact. The two of them received the impact of the heavy pressure, and were directly sent flying, heavily smashing onto the ground, and slid a few meters on the ground. Chapter 131. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them, collectively petrified. All of them had a dumbfounded expression. No one thought that Nie Tian's strength was actually strong to such an extent. In a head-on confrontation with Shang Mingyu, he was not at a disadvantage at all. Nie Tian and Shang Mingyu were both injured in the clash of extreme moves. They stood up almost at the same time, but their expressions were very different. Shang Mingyu stood up, looking at Nie Tian. He was even more angry, almost crazy, wishing he could swallow the other party alive. On the other hand, Nie Tian had a calm expression, even a faint smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. Nie Tian was just smiling bitterly at this time. Shang Mingyu was worthy of being a swordsman who had cultivated a sword heart. Even if he cultivated a set of sword techniques that countered his own spirit attribute, his power was still strong. Fortunately, Shang Mingyu's flowing silver sword and the golden sun sword technique countered each other, otherwise Nie Tian would definitely be defeated miserably at this moment. The golden sun sword technique was only a high-rank yellow-rank sword technique, and it countered Shang Mingyu's flowing silver sword, so it was almost of no help to Shang Mingyu's combat effectiveness. Shang Mingyu was purely using sword qi and sword heart to fight against Nie Tian. Nie Tian was a person who had two kinds of terrifying sword qi, and the proud sword technique was a super heaven rank sword technique. In this case, he was only evenly matched with Shang Mingyu. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the sword heart was. There was a complete qualitative difference between a swordsman with and without sword heart. If Nie Tian cultivated the sword heart at this time, he could definitely kill Shang Mingyu easily. Shang Mingyu, your sword spirit attribute and the golden sun sword technique countered each other. I advise you not to cultivate the golden sun sword technique anymore. If you forcibly cultivate it, not only will it not help your strength, it may even hurt your sword spirit. Nie Tian looked at Shang Mingyu and said lightly. He just saw that Shang Mingyu's sword Dao aptitude was not bad. To be able to cultivate the sword heart before the age of 20, he could already be regarded as a sword Dao genius. But now Shang Mingyu's sword qi sword heart and sword spirit silver sword attributes countered each other. Sword heart and sword spirit, he must abandon one. He could either cultivate another sword art and slowly change the attribute of his sword qi and sword heart, or he could not use the sword spirit in the future. However, the second method wasn't very feasible. After all, after a martial artist reached the giant spirit realm, their origin spirit would condense the giant spirit true body. If a martial artist didn't use the giant spirit true body, their strength would be greatly reduced. Therefore, the best choice in front of Shang Mingyu was to give up on the golden sun sword art and cultivate another sword art. He could use the sword art's attribute to slowly change the sword qi and sword heart attribute. Seeing that Nie Tian was acting like a teacher, Shang Mingyu flew into a rage and roared, "Who do you think you are? You're just a piece of trash that doesn't even have a sword heart." You think you're qualified to teach me a lesson? Not to mention Shang Mingyu couldn't accept Nie Tian's words, even the surrounding people couldn't agree with it. After all, Nie Tian was only at the Sword Qi realm, while Shang Mingyu was born in a Sword Dao family and was someone who had cultivated the Sword Heart. Nie Tian slightly furrowed his brows and said in a cold tone, "You should be thankful that I can teach you a lesson. You don't know what's good for you. You don't know the difference between life and death." Shang Mingyu couldn't bear it anymore. With a roar of anger, Flowing Silver attacked once again. With a stab, Sword Qi spread out several meters. Nie Tian also stabbed out with his sword, sword light filling the air. Once again, the two of them retreated several steps. Nie Tian didn't want to be entangled with Shang Mingyu. It was impossible for the latter to kill him. But if Nie Tian wanted to kill Shang Mingyu, it wouldn't be easy. At the very least, he would need to use one astral soul. Inscribing astral souls used up a lot of Nie Tian's time. Nie Tian treasured every astral soul. Using astral souls on a fool like Shang Mingyu was simply a waste. At this time, a scream suddenly rang out from behind Nie Tian. Nie Tian suddenly turned his head and saw Jean de Bao lying on the ground with a face full of pain, as if he was in great pain. De Bao. From Jean de Bao's body, Nie Tian felt an abnormally tyrannical power stirring. His face immediately changed, and he quickly came to Jean de Bao's side. Jean de Bao screamed again and again, the muscles on his face squeezed together, his expression sinister. What a strong power! Nie Tian felt the berserk power in Jean de Bao's body. It was like an enraged beast, trying to break free from the shackles of his Yuan spirit. Nie Tian could feel that if he didn't do anything now, the power in Jean de Bao's body would definitely destroy his Yuan meridians and Yuan spirit. Thinking of this, Nie Tian no longer hesitated. Yuan Qi surged to his fingertips and several strands of Yuan Qi entered Jean de Bao's body, temporarily sealing his major meridians. With Jean de Bao's meridians sealed, his face suddenly turned red, as if someone was covering his mouth and nose, making him unable to breathe. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned by this sudden scene. Jean de Bao was fine just a moment ago, how did he suddenly become like this? Seeing that Nie Tian was completely focused on Jean de Bao, the corners of Shang Mingyu's mouth suddenly rose, and without hesitation, he brazenly attacked. Triple Yang Wild Flow. With a roar, Shang Mingyu attacked without warning, determined to kill Nie Tian with one sword strike. "Teacher, be careful!" Seeing this scene, Zhang Yifeng shouted. His figure moved, actually wanting to block the sword for Nie Tian. Even though Zhang Yifeng's reaction was fast, he was still a step too late. Silver Sword's attack was extremely fast, arriving in the blink of an eye. "Get out of my way!" At this moment, the 10th Yuan meridian in Nie Tian's body suddenly trembled, surging star energy surged out. War God's 9 layers kill. Nie Tian suddenly stood up, without dodging, heaven-severing slash slashed out diagonally, and 9 strands of sword qi attacked Shang Mingyu. Everyone was dumbfounded. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would actually choose to fight with his life on the line, a method that would injure both sides? Bam! The triple Yang Wild Flow was like a violent wave in the ocean, striking Nie Tian's chest, instantly sending him flying, blood gushing out like a fountain from his chest. At the same time, the War God's 9 layers kills sword qi struck Shang Mingyu's body, leaving 9 bloody holes on his body. Shang Mingyu was like a sieve, blood spurting out crazily. The War God's 9 layers kill was not a move of the proud sword arts, but a martial skill of the 9 extreme War God arts. Compared to the proud sword arts, the 9 extreme War God arts was even more tyrannical and unreasonable. Shang Mingyu hurriedly used his sword qi to seal the bloody holes on his body. Although he managed to stop the flow of blood, he was already extremely weak and almost couldn't stand. Nie Tian received a direct attack from Shang Mingyu and was severely injured, but he got up and walked towards Jean de Bao without looking at Shang Mingyu. Jean de Bayo's face was swollen and red, and blood had already seeped out of the 7 orifices on his face. It was as if he was in a narrow space, and was enduring an abnormally strong pressure. Teacher! Zhang Yifeng took a step forward to Nie Tian's side, and was quite shocked to see Nie Tian's chest bleeding profusely. I'm fine. Nie Tian was completely unaware of the injuries on his body, and his eyes wandered around Jean de Bayo's body. No one knew what had happened, and they looked nervously at the unconscious Jean de Bayo. Oh no! Nie Tian suddenly sensed something, and his expression changed drastically. In the next moment, Nie Tian's heaven-sword stabbed down, piercing small bloody holes on Jean de Bayo's shoulders, thighs, palms, and soles. Fresh blood slowly flowed out of Jean de Bayo's body, and his complexion gradually improved. Chapter 132. Teacher, this. Zhang Yifeng looked at the filthy black blood on the ground and was completely stunned. He had no idea what happened to Jean de Bayo. Let's go. Nie Tian had a serious look on his face. He didn't care about Shang Mingyu and the others at all. He carried Jean de Bayo and left. Zhang Yifeng carried Jean Mingyu and followed behind Nie Tian. Shang Mingyu was stunned. Even after Nie Tian and Zhang Yifeng disappeared, he still had a stupid look on his face. Lan Binji and Qin Yuhu were hidden in the crowd. They had complicated expressions on their faces. Everyone looked at the direction where Nie Tian disappeared and couldn't come back to their senses for a long time. After a while, Nie Tian and Zhang Yifeng appeared in the Jean residence's lobby. In the lobby, Jean de Bayo was lying in the middle of the lobby. The swelling on his body had disappeared quite a bit, but his face was still pale like paper. Nie Tian held on to Jean de Bayo's hand and closed his eyes, carefully checking the condition of Jean de Bayo's body. De Bayo! At this moment, Jean Mingxin rushed over after hearing the news. Mr. Jean, don't worry. Teacher is checking on young Master Jean. Zhang Yifeng hurriedly waved his hand at Jean Mingxin, signaling him not to interrupt Nie Tian. Seeing Nie Tian's serious look, Jean Mingxin's heart immediately sank and he didn't make any sound. Nie Tian's expression slowly became weirder and weirder. Sometimes he shook his head, sometimes he sighed, and sometimes he revealed a mysterious smile. After a while, more and more people appeared in the lobby. Qiu Shan, Qiu Ling'er and Nie Yuro all appeared. After a long time, Nie Tian finally stopped and slowly stood up. His expression became even more serious. Mr. Nie, is de Bayo okay? Jean Mingxin's heart jumped to his throat. Jean de Bayo was his only son. If anything happened to him, he really didn't know how he was going to live in the future. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He just slightly shook his head. Big brother Nie Tian, is Jean de Bayo okay? Say something. Qiu Ling-er was a bit anxious and shouted. Miss Ling-er, Mr. Nie is already thinking of a solution. Qiu Shan quickly pulled Qiu Ling-er back. No one dared to speak loudly again. They all looked at Nie Tian attentively, waiting for him to speak. Nie Tian scanned the crowd and finally spoke. Nie Tian shifted his gaze to Jean Mingxin and said, President Jean, de Bayo's life isn't in danger at the moment. But his condition is very bad. Mr. Nie, is there a problem with de Bayo's origin spirit? Jean Mingxin saw that Nie Tian wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He knew that Jean de Bayo's situation wasn't optimistic, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Jean Mingxin had always known that there was a problem with Jean de Bayo's origin spirit. However, he originally thought that Jean de Bayo's origin spirit could not increase his strength, but at least it would not endanger his life. Now it seemed that he had been too optimistic. Yes. Nie Tian nodded and said, I have some questions to ask you. Jean Mingxin only had this one son. As long as he could save Jean de Bayo, not to mention answering questions, he would even die for him. Yes. Jean Mingxin agreed. Please ask, Mr. Nie. As long as I can save de Bayo, I'll do anything you want me to. Nie Tian sucked in a deep breath and said, Regarding Jean de Bao's origin spirit. When did his origin spirit awaken? When he was 10. Jean Mingxin calculated in his heart. 5 years ago. When Jean Mingxin said this, Qiushan and the rest were all stunned. They hadn't thought that Jean de Bao's origin spirit would awaken so early. Those who could awaken their origin spirit before the age of 10 were all monstrous geniuses. However, looking at Jean de Bao's huge lump of fat, no one could associate him with a genius no matter what. As expected, Nie Tian's expression changed. Jean Mingxin's answer was within his expectations. Which is to say, de Bao has been stuck at the first level of origin spirit for 5 years. Yes. Although he was unwilling to admit this fact, Jean Mingxin still nodded heavily. Remaining stagnant for 5 years after his origin spirit had awakened, probably only a weirdo like Jean de Bao could do this. Does de Bao possess sensory abilities that far surpass ordinary people, especially at close range? Even someone who has completely retracted their aura would not be able to hide from him? Nie Tian continued to ask. Yes. Jean Mingxin had a look of surprise on his face. It is indeed so. I understand. Nie Tian nodded slightly, a smile finally appearing on his face. Mr. Nie, have you thought of a way to save de Bao? Jean Mingxin was extremely agitated, tears almost flowing out of his eyes. Qiushan, Zhang Yifeng, Qiu Ling and Yeyuro also looked at Nie Tian with great anticipation. Nie Tian did not answer Jean Mingxin's question, instead saying, "If I'm not wrong, de Bao's origin spirit should be a book." Pausing with a smile, Nie Tian continued, "And it's a book that has never been opened before." A book? Other than Jean Mingxin, everyone present was stunned. Martial artists' origin spirits, beast spirits, wood spirits and weapon spirits were the most common, but book spirits were much rarer. No one would have thought that Jean de Bao's origin spirit was actually a book. In fact, Nie Tian's origin spirit also had a book spirit, but he had 2 origin spirits, the Primal Chaos original coffin and the Star Soul original book. The Star Soul original book was the book spirit. Jean Mingxin calmed down and nodded. De Bao's origin spirit is indeed a book, called the Blood Scroll of Gods and Demons. Blood Scroll of Gods and Demons. The name of Jean de Bao's origin spirit was very domineering. Unfortunately, it had not been of any use so far, other than increasing his sensory abilities. Hearing the words Blood Scroll of Gods and Demons, Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank. He was a little shocked in his heart, but the corners of his mouth curled up and he laughed strangely, as expected. No wonder the power in de Bao's body is so strong, it's actually the legendary 3,000 seals of gods and demons. 3,000 seals of gods and demons? Everyone, including Jean Mingxin, had a look of astonishment on their faces. They had no idea what Nie Tian was talking about. The 3,000 seals of gods and demons, one of the 10 strongest seals in the legends. Nie Tian had never seen the 3,000 seals of gods and demons, but he had seen another seal that was on the same level as the 3,000 seals of gods and demons, the demonic heaven-devouring seal. The demonic heaven-devouring seal was a powerful seal that the demon world's sovereign Qi Wuxia Ocean possessed. Back then, when Nie Tian and the demon sovereign Qi Wuxia Ocean had a life-and-death battle, the latter had used the demonic heaven-devouring seal. As a result, a continent in the day-night celestial realm was completely destroyed, heaven and earth inverted, and space-time collapsed. The entire space had become an abyss of nothingness. After that, that world became known as the demonic heaven-devouring abyss. Until now, the demonic heaven-devouring abyss was still a forbidden area in the day-night celestial realm. The demonic heaven-devouring seal was known as the 10th seal, ranked 10th among the 10 strongest seals. As for the 3,000 seals of gods and demons, it was known as the 9th seal, ranked 9th among the 10 strongest seals. From this, it could be seen that the 3,000 seals of gods and demons was even more terrifying than the demonic heaven-devouring seal. It was just that the 3,000 seals of gods and demons had already disappeared since ancient times. Who would have thought that after several tens of thousands of years, it would actually reappear in the world once more, and it even appeared on Jean de Bayo's body by a freak combination of factors. Chapter 133. Everyone saw Nye Tian's strange expression. One moment he was smiling, the next moment he was worried. They didn't know what he was thinking, so they didn't dare to disturb him. Nye Tian already knew what was going on with Jean de Bayo, but he still didn't know how to deal with the current situation. The 3,000 demon god seal was the terrifying power hidden within Jean de Bayo's body. The 3,000 Godfiend seals were actually a seal that was added to the Godfiend blood scroll. It was like a door lock. Only by opening the lock of the 3,000 Fiend God seals could the Fiend God Blood Codex be opened, and Jean de Bayo's strength would increase. It was precisely because the 3,000 Demon God seals had been sealed that Jean de Bayo's strength had not increased in the past 5 years. If today's accident had not happened, the 3,000 Fiend God seals could possibly be sealed forever, and Jean de Bayo would also only be able to forever remain at the first level of the Essence Spirit realm. However, when Shang Mingyu's attack landed on Jean de Bayo's body, even though the Golden Lightning battle armor had helped him block the damage, the sword chi had still managed to enter Jean de Bayo's body, stimulating the 3,000 Devil God seals. The thorniest problem was that Jean de Bayo's body was too weak. He was unable to control the 3,000 demon god seals. This was different from when Nye Tian helped Mo Rushi awaken the 9 heavens Divine Phoenix's origin spirit. The Divine Phoenix seal in Mo Rushi's body was suppressed by the 9 heavens Divine Phoenix, so Nye Tian only needed to help Mo Rushi awaken her primordial spirit. He didn't need to suppress the Divine Phoenix seal. But now, he had to help Jean de Bayo suppress the 3,000 demon god seals and slowly open them. If 3,000 seals were to be opened at the same time, unless Jean de Bayo was at the Heavenly Emperor realm, otherwise, he would not be able to withstand such a powerful force at all. For the current Jean de Bayo, the most ideal situation was for him to open the 3,000 Godfiend seals one by one. Following the opening of the seal, Jean de Bayo's strength would slowly increase. By the time his strength advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm, he would be able to withstand the power of 3,000 seals. However, in order to suppress the 3,000 Fiend God seals, one needed a Tier 9 spirit pill or a Tier 9 medicinal herb. At this moment, the 3,000 demon god seals were only in the active stage and were not very powerful. 10,000-year ice soul, extreme sea black iron, 1,000 leaves sapphire, and extreme purple heavenly crow. These Tier 9 herbs could easily suppress the 3,000 Fiend God seals. Unfortunately, these 9th-grade medicinal herbs were extremely rare, let alone a third-rate empire like the Blue Cloud Empire. Even in the Shumi world or the heavenly realm of the gods, they were extremely rare. Without a doubt, even if Nye Tian turned the entire Minor Sumer world upside down, he would not be able to find a Tier 9 medicinal herb. Mr. Nye, please save de Bayo. Seeing that Nye Tian's eyebrows were furrowed, Jean Mingxin couldn't control her emotions any longer, and burst into tears. Nye Tian quickly supported Jean Mingxin and said, "Don't worry, President Jean. De Bayo is my good brother, I will definitely save him." In this short period of time, Nye Tian had long regarded Jean de Bayo as one of his own. Even if Jean Mingxin didn't beg him, he would still save them. Moreover, the 3,000 demon and god seals in Jean de Bayo's body were stimulated by Shang Mingyu's sword chi, which was why they became active. Speaking of which, Nye Tian had some responsibility for this matter as well. Thus, no matter what price he had to pay, Nye Tian would definitely save Jean de Bayo. Jean de Bayo's situation was indeed very thorny. If he didn't deal with it immediately, he might not even be able to survive today. Nye Tian's gaze swept across everyone, and suddenly, his gaze landed on Zhang Yifeng. he suddenly thought of something that could temporarily suppress the 3,000 demon and god seals. Demonic fire. That's right. It was the demonic fire within Zhang Yifeng's body, Doomsday Flame. Doomsday Flame, demonic fire ranked 13th on the demonic fire list. It was refined from the heart of Doomsday Volcano's lava, and after absorbing 10,000 years of baleful aura, its demonic nature was extremely strong. It was rumored that it had the might to burn the heavens and the earth. Although the demonic fire within Zhang Yifeng's body wasn't the main body of Doomsday Flame, the 3,000 demon and god seals were not completely stimulated. Thus, Zhang Yifeng could use the demonic fire within Zhang Yifeng's body to temporarily suppress the 3,000 demon and god seals. Teacher, this. Zhang Yifeng sensed that Nie Tian had been looking at him all along, and sweat couldn't help but form on his forehead. He was a bit at a loss as to what to do. Nie Tian's expression turned stern as he said with a serious expression, Yifeng, teacher wants to ask for something from you to save De Bao, are you willing? Seeing that Nie Tian's expression was serious, Zhang Yifeng couldn't help but gulp down his saliva. Soon after, he knelt down and said, Teacher, as long as this disciple has it, I can give it to teacher, even if it is my life. All right. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I want your demonic fire. Demonic fire? Zhang Yifeng went into a daze and soon after, he let out a sigh of relief. Seeing that Nie Tian had a serious expression on his face, he thought that Nie Tian wanted to borrow his head. Demonic fire wasn't as important as life, but it was still very important. Without demonic fire, Zhang Yifeng might not be able to have any achievements in the field of alchemy in the future. The reason why he was able to become a third-realm alchemist at such a young age was all because of the demonic fire. Once he loses the demonic fire, he would lose his biggest support. Nie Tian, of course, knew what Zhang Yifeng was thinking. He said softly, Yifeng, I will now officially accept you as my direct disciple. Are you willing? Zhang Yifeng was a little shocked, but he quickly reacted. He was so excited that he kowtowed and shouted, This disciple is willing. After being Nie Tian's disciple for so long, Zhang Yifeng had already seen how powerful Nie Tian was. He had always been thinking about how to become Nie Tian's official disciple. Now that he had become a direct disciple, how could he not be excited? In Nie Tian's past life, he had many disciples, but he only had 9 direct disciples. Tang Hao, who had an unknown relationship with Tang 13, was his 9th direct disciple. And Zhang Yifeng was going to become his 10th direct disciple. Zhang Yifeng wasn't stupid, in fact, he was very smart. In front of everyone, he immediately knelt down 3 times and kowtowed 9 times in front of Nie Tian to become his disciple. Nie Tian attached great importance to this etiquette. After the ceremony of acknowledging him as his master. After the ceremony, it meant that Zhang Yifeng was officially his direct disciple. Zhang Yifeng's achievements in the future, and his future path, were all Nie Tian's responsibility. Nie Tian wouldn't easily accept a disciple, and he definitely wouldn't accept a direct disciple. To be able to become Nie Tian's direct disciple, Zhang Yifeng's ancestors burned incense and accumulated a lot of good karma. Nie Tian gestured for Zhang Yifeng to stand up. He said in a serious tone, Very good. From now on, you are my 10th direct disciple. 10th. Zhang Yifeng and everyone else at the scene were shocked. Who would have thought that at such a young age, Nie Tian would have so many disciples? Teacher, could it be that I have 9 brothers? Zhang Yifeng couldn't hide his excitement. He didn't doubt Nie Tian's words at all. Nie Tian nodded. Then, with a smile, he said, The first gift I'm going to give you is a promise. A promise? Everyone was curious. They didn't know what Nie Tian would say next. Chapter 134. Devil Fire List? Devil Fire Origin Body? Hearing Nie Tian's words, Jin Mingxin and the others were baffled. They did not know what Nie Tian was talking about, nor did they know how terrifying Nie Tian's promise was. But Zhang Yifeng knew what Nie Tian's promise meant. Devil flame, this was something that every alchemist yearned for in their dreams. In ancient times, the Alchemist Guild collected information on all the devil fires in the world and compiled it into a devil fire list. The devil fire list recorded thousands of devil fires. Among them, being able to obtain a devil fire that was not ranked in the top 100 was enough for a pill refiner to be proud. To be able to obtain a devil fire in the top 100 of the devil fire list, all of them were grandmasters of the pill Dao world. Zhang Yifeng once heard that the president of the 3000 Small Worlds Alchemist Guild only had a devil fire that was ranked 83rd. Nie Tian promised him a devil fire that was ranked in the top 10, and it was the devil fire origin body. Zhang Yifeng felt as if a huge pile of dog shit had fallen from the sky and smashed on his head. If he had to use a sentence to describe his current mood, it would be that happiness came too suddenly. Yifeng, you can rest assured. Master will definitely keep his promise. Nie Tian looked at Zhang Yifeng, who was still in a daze, and said indifferently, "Disciple thanks Master." Zhang Yifeng was so excited that his body was trembling and his voice was trembling. Nie Tian only nodded and said, "Now, transfer the devil fire in your body to Debao's body." Giving such a grand promise to Zhang Yifeng, Nie Tian was only giving him compensation for stripping the devil fire in his body. But this compensation was indeed a bit too much. Zhang Yifeng's body was only a remnant flame of the Doomsday Flame, and the Doomsday Flame was only ranked 13th. Nie Tian was indeed generous to promise Zhang Yifeng a devil fire that was ranked in the top 10. Zhang Yifeng came to Jean Debao's side and circulated the Yuan meridians in his body to the extreme. Surging Yuan Qi gathered in his palm and formed a white flame that was about a meter long. When the demonic flame Doomsday Flame appeared, the surrounding temperature immediately rose by dozens of degrees. Everyone felt a scorching heat, burning them to the point of pain. However, the Doomsday Flames did not harm Zhang Yifeng at all. After using the method that Nie Tian taught him, Zhang Yifeng was able to control the Doomsday Flame freely. As long as he infused the flames in his palm into Jean Debao's body, the Doomsday Flames would change owners. After hesitating for a moment, Zhang Yifeng waved his palm, and the pale white fireball flew out. It stopped on Jean Debao's body for a moment before being absorbed. The 3000 god and demon seals were like a monster, eager to devour all energy. Jean Mingxin's face paled. He was truly worried that the Doomsday Flame would harm Jean Debao. Fortunately, after the Doomsday Flame fused into Jean Debao's body, the latter finally woke up. "Dad, what happened?" Jean Debao's head felt heavy, and he slowly stood up. Seeing everyone staring at him, he couldn't help being startled. "Debao, my son, you're finally awake." Jean Mingxin couldn't hide his excitement. He hugged his son tightly, tears streaming down his face. When the others saw that Jean Debao had woken up, they also heaved a sigh of relief. Nie Tian saw that Zhang Yifeng was very weak and motioned for him to go back and rest first. Seeing Zhang Yifeng leave, Nie Tian immediately turned his gaze to Jean Debao. Jean Debao had absorbed the power of the Doomsday Flame. His body simultaneously contained the 3000 god and demon seals and the Doomsday Flame. Therefore, in the following period of time, Jean Debao's strength would rapidly increase. However, the Doomsday Flame would soon be completely absorbed by the 3000 god and demon seals. At that time, Jean Debao would once again fall into today's situation. Debao, the 3000 god and demon seals in your body have already been opened. I believe that your origin spirit and demon blood scroll have also been opened. Do you feel anything strange now? Nie Tian stepped forward and asked. "Oh, it's true. My origin spirit and demon blood scroll has been opened." Jean Debao was pleasantly surprised and said excitedly, "I feel like my whole body has endless power. It's like I can knock down a rank 2 spirit beast with one punch." Nie Tian nodded slightly. The 3000 god and demon seals were opened. Coupled with the power of the doomsday flame, it was very normal for Jean de Bayeux to feel bursting with power. The doomsday flame had a suppressive effect on the 3,000 god and demon seals. But this kind of suppression could not last for long. It would be thoroughly devoured by the 3,000 god and demon seals very soon. At that time, the seals would become berserk again. Nie Tian estimated that the doomsday flame could at most last for a month's time. After all, the doomsday flame in Jean de Bayeux's body was not the demonic fire's main body. A month's time, Nie Tian must find something that could suppress the 3,000 god and demon seals within a month. Otherwise, Jean de Bayeux's life would be in danger at any time. Mr. Nie, Master Zhang Yifeng has already helped de Bayeux fuse with the demonic fire. Is de Bayeux already fine? Jean Mingxin saw that Nie Tian's expression was still solemn and asked probingly. Nie Tian shook his head and did not hide anything. He said, "The effect of the demonic fire will not last long. At most, it will last for a month." A month? Jean Mingxin's face changed. He was stunned. What about after a month? Nie Tian said lightly, "Don't worry, I will find a way to suppress the seal within a month." "Thank you, Mr. Nie." Jean Mingxin bowed deeply. His gratitude was beyond words. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. He knew in his heart that it was very difficult to find something that could suppress the 3,000 god and demon seals. Especially in the 3,000 small worlds, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Maybe I can ask him for help? Nie Tian's mind moved. He suddenly thought of a person, Gu Yi. Gu Yi was the mysterious old man that Nie Tian met in the Black Market Dan Xin Pavilion. So far, Nie Tian did not know Gu Yi's true strength. But he should at least be a 5th-stage alchemist, or even higher. A 5th-stage alchemist was already considered a top alchemist in the 3,000 small world. For such an alchemy grandmaster to live in the black market of a third-rate empire, there must be a reason behind it. Nie Tian told Jean de Bayeux to cultivate in seclusion. The higher his strength, the stronger his resistance against the 3,000 god and demon seals. Jean de Bayeux's matter could only be dealt with in this way. Next, Nie Tian could not focus on cultivation. He could only focus on finding the item that could suppress the 3,000 god and demon seals for Jean de Bayeux. Everyone left. Nie Tian brought Nie Yuro, Qiu Shan, and Qiu Ling back to his courtyard. "Qiu Shan, are your injuries healed?" Nie Tian saw that Qiu Shan's complexion was good and asked with a smile. Qiu Shan nodded heavily. His heart was filled with anticipation. Nie Tian naturally knew what he was thinking. He said, "Since your injuries are healed, let me heal your Yuan Meridian." Now? Qiu Shan was stunned. He thought that Nie Tian would need to prepare carefully before healing his Yuan Meridian. Now? Nie Tian nodded slightly. Although Qiu Shan's Yuan Meridian was a hidden injury that had lasted for more than 20 years, it was nothing to Nie Tian. Chapter 135. In the room, Nie Tian let out a deep breath and put away the 12 silver needles. "Mr. Nie, my Yuan Meridians have recovered." Qiu Shan looked inside his body and found that all 9 of his Yuan Meridians had recovered. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. Nie Tian had only inserted 12 silver needles into his hands, feet, shoulders, back, thighs, and knees. Then, he felt a numbing sensation all over his body. Moments later, when Nie Tian pulled out all the needles, his Yuan Meridians had recovered. Everything was too miraculous. Qiu Shan couldn't imagine how Nie Tian had done it. Qiu Shan's Yuan Meridians had been treated by many pill refiners, but all of them thought it was incurable and even advised Qiu Shan to give up. Such a stubborn disease, in the hands of Nie Tian, was as easy as eating and drinking. He was cured with 2 or 3 needles. Actually, Qiu Shan didn't know that the technique Nie Tian used was acupuncture with silver needles, a lost technique from the medieval era. Nie Tian had unintentionally found it in an ancient book. Acupuncture with silver needles could basically treat all yuan meridian injuries. Not to mention damaged yuan meridians, even broken yuan meridians could be healed by acupuncture with silver needles. Nie Tian's expression was indifferent as he smiled. Qiu Shan, your yuan meridians have recovered. Right now, the energy accumulated in your dantian is very abundant. Therefore, your strength will soar in the coming period. You'd better be prepared. Qiu Shan's yuan meridians had been damaged for 25 years. During this time, his strength hadn't improved at all. However, Qiu Shan obviously didn't stop cultivating, hoping for a miracle. In the past 25 years, the heaven and earth spirit energy that Qiu Shan had absorbed had all accumulated in his dantian and not been absorbed by his yuan meridians. Now that his yuan meridians had recovered, the heaven and earth spirit energy was like a flood that had broken a dam. Qiu Shan's strength would definitely soar. Nie Tian estimated that with Qiu Shan's talent, his strength would at least reach the giant spirit realm after a month after his yuan meridians had finished digesting the heaven and earth spirit energy in his dantian. He might even break through to the higher levels of the giant spirit realm. Qiu Shan's current strength was at the first level of the Wanxiang realm, but this was his strength from 25 years ago. He used to be the rookie king of Tyrant Cloud, so his aptitude in martial arts was definitely excellent. Advancing a large realm in 25 years was already Nie Tian's most conservative estimate for Qiu Shan. Mr. Nie. Qiu Shan's face suddenly became solemn. He knelt on one knee in front of Nie Tian and said in a clear voice, "Mr.'s great kindness to Qiu Shan is unable to repay. Mr., please allow Qiu Shan to stay by Mr.'s side. Qiu Shan is willing to serve Mr. as a servant." After saying that, Qiu Shan knelt down. He had once said that if Nie Tian could cure his hidden illness, he was willing to serve Nie Tian as a servant for 10 years. However, he now understood that being able to stay by Nie Tian's side was definitely not a bad thing. On the contrary, it was a great thing. In fact, Qiu Shan once had the thought of worshipping Nie Tian as his master. However, when he thought that even a genius alchemy like Zhang Yifeng could only be an unofficial disciple of Nie Tian, he gave up on the idea. To be able to stay by Nie Tian's side, Qiu Shan was already satisfied, even if it was to be the latter's follower. Seeing that Qiu Shan was sincere, Nie Tian couldn't reject him. He signaled the latter to stand up and said, "Qiu Shan, if you want to stay by my side, I won't oppose it. However, we are not master and servant but friends." Qiu Shan's face was filled with astonishment. He didn't expect Nie Tian to say such a thing. This made him feel extremely flattered. To be able to become friends with someone like Nie Tian, Qiu Shan couldn't ask for more. "Thank you, Mr." Qiu Shan stood up and bowed. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He suddenly thought of something and said, "Qiu Shan, I will be leaving the Jin residence for a period of time. During this period of time, you will be responsible for my 9th sister's safety. Is that all right?" "Where are you going, mister?" Qiu Shan was slightly startled. Nie Tian didn't hide anything and said, "De Bao's situation isn't optimistic. I must find a way to suppress the 3,000 seals of gods and demons within a month." Qiu Shan nodded and said solemnly, "Mister, don't worry. Qiu Shan will definitely protect Miss Yuro's safety. Even if I die, I won't let anyone hurt Miss Yuro. With these words I can rest assured." Nie Tian smiled faintly and opened the door. In the small courtyard, Qiu Ling and Nie Yuro were waiting. The two girls were playing with little Pishio. Unfortunately, little Pishio was in a deep sleep. No matter how much the two girls touched it, it wouldn't open its eyes. "Uncle Qiu Shan, are you done?" Qiu Ling saw Qiu Shan and Nie Tian walking out and was pleasantly surprised. "Miss Ling Mr. Nie's technique is exquisite and unparalleled. I am done." Qiu Shan nodded and said, "Ling thanks big brother Nie Tian." Qiu Ling was extremely grateful and thanked him excitedly. Roer thanks big brother Nyetian. On the other side, Nyeyuro also mimicked Chiu Ling-er's voice and posture and said mischievously. Nyetian stepped forward and pinched Nyeyuro's red cheek. He smiled and said, "Yuro, what are you thanking me for?" Nyeyuro hugged little Guai tightly and said seriously, "Thank you, big brother Nyetian, for giving Roer the spiritual pill. Roer is already an essence spirit warrior." "You've awakened your essence spirit?" Nyetian exclaimed. His divine sense swept across Nyeyuro and his expression instantly became sluggish. "Oh my God! Roer, how old are you? You've actually awakened your essence spirit." Chiu Ling-er was also shocked and shouted. Chiu Shan stood rooted to the ground and was completely dumbfounded. Nyeyuro waved her pink hand in front of Nyetian and giggled. "Big brother Nyetian, what's wrong with you guys? Roer is already 9 years old. Is it strange to awaken your essence spirit?" 9 years old. Awakened her essence spirit at 9 years old. She was practically a monster. Jean de Bao awakened his essence spirit at 10 years old. Everyone already felt that it was unbelievable, let alone Nyeyuro, who awakened her essence spirit at 9 years old. For a martial artist to awaken their essence spirit, they had to first awaken 9 elemental meridians. Generally speaking, those who could awaken 9 elemental meridians before the age of 20 were less than 1 in 100. Those who could awaken 9 elemental meridians before the age of 15 were already rare geniuses. Hence, Nyetian was already the #1 genius of Moyang City when he awakened 9 elemental meridians at the age of 13. Nyeyuro awakened her essence spirit at the age of 9. This talent was comparable to Nyetian in his previous life. In his previous life, the god of war, Nyetian, also awakened his essence spirit at the age of 9. "Yuro, release your essence spirit and let me have a look." After a while, Nyetian finally regained his senses. Suppressing the shock in his heart, he said excitedly. Chiu Shan and Chiu Ling also stared at Nyeyuro, obviously looking forward to it. A monster who awakened her essence spirit at the age of 9. Her essence spirit must be very terrifying. Nyeyuro pouted, appearing a bit bashful as she said, "Can I not look?" Nyetian was even more interested. He shook his head and said, "No." "All right then. You guys are not allowed to laugh at Roer." Nyeyuro's small face puffed up, looking a little embarrassed. She circulated her elemental energy and the essence spirit in her body sensed it. A pink shadow appeared behind her. Chapter 136. Everyone stared blankly at Nyeyuro's original soul, speechless for a long time. The pink shadow had short and thin forelimbs, thick and long hind limbs. 2 large ears were raised in the air, and its entire body exuded a faint pink glow. There was even a faint fragrance wafting through the air. Roer, your original soul is actually, a pink rabbit? Finally, Chiu Ling-er could not hold it in any longer and exclaimed in shock. That's right, Nyeyuro's original soul was a rabbit, and a pink one at that. A flowing color demon rabbit. The flowing color demon rabbit did not seem to have any offensive power, much less any deterrent power. Instead, it gave off a very cute and kawaii feeling. Chiu Shan's brows furrowed, unable to accept the reality in front of him. Nyetian's expression was very strange as he continued to observe the flowing color demon rabbit. Although at first glance, the flowing color demon rabbit did not seem like anything special, Nyetian could sense that its original soul aptitude was very high, at least above the 6th level. However, he did not have a Yuan soul wheel, so he could not know the specific origin spirit aptitude of the flowing color demon rabbit. What surprised Nyetian the most was the faint pink glow that enveloped the flowing color demon rabbit's body. Nyetian guessed that Nyeyuro's flowing color demon rabbit's original soul was most likely of the 9 elements, and it also had a bit of the wind attribute. The 9 elements of heaven and earth were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light, and darkness. A martial artist's original soul was usually of the 5 elements, which were metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Very few people had the wind and lightning attribute, and 1 in a million had the light and darkness attribute. Nyeuro's flowing color demon rabbit was actually a light and wind attribute dual element original soul. Its potential was unimaginable. Nyetian's previous life's original soul, the 9 extreme beast, was of the lightning attribute and had extremely strong offensive power. A light attribute original soul was even more terrifying than a lightning attribute original soul. Moreover, the flowing color demon rabbit had a second attribute, the wind attribute. If Nyeuro could cultivate a suitable martial technique, she would definitely be able to reach the Heavenly Emperor realm in the future, and become a very powerful Heavenly Emperor at that. My little sister, you might really become a peerless martial artist in the future. Nye Tian's lips curled up, his heart filled with joy. He suddenly recalled Nyeuro's words. Big brother Nye Tian, Ro will protect you when she grows up. Perhaps that day will really come. Nye Tian looked at Nyeuro, his heart already filled with a lot of anticipation. Brother Nye Tian, is Ro-er's original spirit not good? When Nyeuro saw that everyone was staring at her in a daze, she immediately became worried. Her face was filled with grievance, making her look exceptionally cute. Of course not. Nye Tian stroked Nyeuro's little head, resolutely saying, Ro-er's origin spirit is extremely powerful. Big brother Nye Tian will need to rely on Ro-er to protect you in the future. Really? Nyeuro's eyes flashed like black gems, filled with pleasant surprise. It's absolutely true. Big brother Nye Tian never lies. Nye Tian smiled faintly. Then Ro-er can rest assured. Nyeuro nodded her head heavily, the stone in her heart finally lifted. Nyeuro had awakened her origin spirit, but Nye Tian was now faced with another problem. He needed to find a suitable martial technique for Nyeuro. With Nyeuro's talent in the martial way, she definitely needed a high-rank martial technique, at least a heaven-rank one. Otherwise, it would be a waste of her talent. Unfortunately, Nye Tian did not have a suitable martial technique on hand. At the very least, he did not have a suitable martial technique for Nyeuro. I'll think of something later. Right now, the most important thing is to solve Debao's problem. Nye Tian said in his heart. No matter what, he would definitely find a suitable martial technique for Nyeuro. Ro-er, I will be leaving for a period of time. When I'm not here, stay with Uncle Chiu Shan and big sister Ling-er. They will protect your safety. Is that okay? Nye Tian decided to tell Nyeuro first, lest she worry. Nyeuro nodded obediently, saying, Ro-er understands. Big brother Fatty is sick. Big brother Nye Tian wants to find something to cure big brother Fatty's illness. Nyeuro was very smart. She actually guessed what Nye Tian was going to do. As Nyeuro said this, she handed little Guai to Nye Tian and said, Big brother Nye Tian, take little Guai with you. Little Guai is very powerful. Last time when Ro-er was captured by bad guys, it was little Guai who protected Ro-er. That's why the bad guys did not bully Ro-er. Nye Tian was slightly stunned. He did not expect Nyeuro to be so obedient and sensible. Little Pichio was, after all, an ancient spiritual beast with limitless potential. Once it grew up, it would be comparable to a heavenly emperor powerhouse. Although little Guai was only a month old, it already had very strong combat strength. The key was that the power of ice in its body was very domineering. Even manifestation realm martial artists did not dare to underestimate it. Then I thank Ro-er. Nye Tian took little Guai and smiled faintly. Immediately, Nye Tian gave Chiu Shan a few more instructions and then left the Jin residence. After leaving the Jin residence, Nye Tian walked directly to Wu City. After a moment, Nye Tian's figure arrived at the entrance of the black market. Nye Tian came to the black market to find Gu Yi for a chat, hoping to obtain some important information from this mysterious old man. Gu Yi's attainments in the Tao of alchemy were very high. There must be some hidden story behind him holing up in Blue Cloud City's black market. Entering the black market, Nie Tian was not nervous in the slightest. He currently had 4 star souls on him. Even if he encountered an assassin like Tang Yuyu again, he would not be afraid. Although Nie Tian only had the strength of a 7th-level origin spirit, he had the confidence to deal with an enemy with the strength of a 9th-level manifestation realm. In a small place like Blue Cloud City, a 9th-level manifestation realm was already a peak powerhouse. It was very rare. When Nie Tian entered the Dan Hart Pavilion, the first thing he saw was the purple dragon whisker placed in the center. It seemed like Gu Yi was very satisfied with the purple dragon whisker. Otherwise, he would not have placed it in such an eye-catching position. "Young Master Nie, you're here." Once again, Gu Yi appeared behind Nie Tian without anyone noticing. His goatee curled up high, appearing somewhat pleased with himself. "You knew that I would return?" Nie Tian smiled faintly. Looking at Gu Yi's appearance, the latter seemed to have expected that he would return. Furthermore, he was very much looking forward to his arrival. "Sort of." Gu Yi laughed brightly and said, "There was a young pill refinement master beside you last time. His body had the aura of the Devilfire Apocalypse flame. At that time, this old man could already tell that the Devilfire in his body showed faint signs of agitation. I believe that he's already unable to suppress it now." Nie Tian saw Gu Yi's unfathomable look. Clearly, he was intentionally putting on the appearance of an otherworldly expert. Sadly, the target of his posturing was wrong. Nie Tian was the true otherworldly expert. Nie Tian looked at Gu Yi's appearance and instantly understood. Gu Yi definitely thought that the Devilfire in Zhang Yifeng's body could not be suppressed anymore. Hence, he came to seek help. Back then, Zhang Yifeng had just suppressed the Devilfire not long ago. Therefore, it was nothing strange for Gu Yi to be able to detect the aura of the Devilfire in his body. Actually, Gu Yi also merely detected that there was Devilfire in Zhang Yifeng's body. The rest were all his own conjectures. Chapter 137. You didn't come because of the demonic fire? Gu Yi looked at Nie Tian in astonishment, expressing his doubt. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "I have already solved the demonic fire's problem. There's no need for Gu Yi to worry about me." Gu Yi frowned, the wrinkles on his face were about to fold into a paper airplane, appearing to be a little disappointed. Nie Tian didn't care too much about it and said, "The reason why I came to visit Gu Yi this time is because I want to know, in the Blue Cloud Empire or the nearby empires, where can I find a 9th-ranked medicinal herb or a 9th-ranked spirit pill?" 9th-ranked spirit pill. Who knew that once Nie Tian said this, Gu Yi would jump up and cry out in shock, as if he was stung by a hornet. He suddenly went up and covered Nie Tian's forehead, saying in all seriousness, "Young man, you can't be having a fever, right?" Nie Tian pushed away Gu Yi's claws and said indifferently, "It's just a 9th-ranked medicinal herb and a 9th-ranked spirit pill. Is there a need to make such a big fuss?" "Make a big fuss?" Gu Yi shrieked again, laughing weirdly. "Young man, do you know, in the entire small Sumer world, there has never been a 9th-ranked medicinal herb, and no one has ever refined a 9th-ranked spirit pill." Gu Yi had a face of wanting to continue, saying angrily, "In the small Sumer world, the pinnacle of alchemists is a 6th-ranked alchemist. No one has even seen a 7th-ranked spirit pill. This old man has lived for more than 200 years, and until now, I have never seen a 9th-ranked medicinal herb. The moment you open your mouth, you want to know about 9th-ranked medicinal herb or spirit pill. How can I not make a fuss over nothing?" Nie Tian's face was filled with black lines. He indeed didn't think of this point. The small Sumer world was only a lower-level world of the Sumer world, and the Sumer world was a lower-level world of the Heaven realm. 9th-ranked medicinal herb or spirit pill was already rare in the Heaven realm, so how could it be found in the small Sumer world? Thinking of this, Nyetian couldn't help but frown. The matter was much more troublesome than he thought. Based on Gu Yi's words, even if he turned the entire mini-Sumer world upside down, he definitely wouldn't be able to find Tier 9 medicinal herbs or Tier 9 spirit pills. Young Master Nye, why do you want a Tier 9 spirit pill? Gu Yi suddenly smiled strangely when he saw the worry on Nyetian's face. I have a friend who was born with a powerful seal in his body. Now that the seal has been activated, he needs to suppress it in order to survive. Jean de Bao's matter was very urgent, so Nyetian did not hide too much. Innate seal. Gu Yi's expression immediately became nervous. Just what kind of seal would require a rank 9 spirit pill to suppress it? Seals were also divided into levels, from level 1 to level 9. A seal that required a rank 9 spirit pill to suppress was at least a rank 8 or rank 9 spirit pill. It's a very powerful seal. Nyetian didn't say it clearly and only vaguely. The 3000 Demon God seals was one of the 10 strongest seals. It wasn't a Tier 8 seal, nor a Tier 9 seal, but a Tier 10 seal. The 10 strongest seals, every single one of them surpassed the existence of a Tier 9 seal, so they were called Tier 10 seals. Nyetian didn't tell this news to Gu Yi because he was afraid of scaring him. Now it seemed that Nyetian had overestimated Gu Yi. The pinnacle of pill masters in the mini-Sumer world were only at the Tier 6 standard. That Gu Yi was at most a Tier 6 pill master. A Tier 6 pill master was indeed very powerful, but to Nyetian, it was of no use, at least not now. Gu Yi, you're a Tier 6 pill master, right? Nyetian still didn't give up and asked. Gu Yi smiled awkwardly and said, I used to be. What about now? Nyetian saw that Gu Yi's face was troubled, but he still asked. At most, I'm at the level of a Tier 5 pill master. Gu Yi nodded his head solemnly. Nyetian nodded his head. It was obvious that something must have happened to Gu Yi, but he didn't ask too much. After all, everyone had their own secret. Gu Yi, I'll take my leave. Since Gu Yi couldn't help, Nyetian didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. Young Master Nye. Gu Yi suddenly called out to Nyetian. Nyetian turned his head and saw Gu Yi's hesitant face, as if he was thinking about something. Gu Yi hesitated for a long time, but finally asked, Your friend's seal can only be suppressed with a Tier 9 spirit pill? Gu Yi, if you have something to say, just say it. Gu Yi obviously had something to say, so Nyetian naturally wouldn't be polite. Gu Yi stared at Nyetian for a long time, as if trying to confirm something. Finally, he chose to speak and said, Has young Master Nye heard of the Doomsday Flame? Doomsday Flame? Nyetian was slightly stunned, but asked in reply, The Demon Fire ranked 13th on the Demon Fire list. That's right. All alchemists knew of the existence of the Demon Fire list, so Nyetian's reaction didn't arouse Gu Yi's suspicions. Gu Yi said, Doomsday Flame, ranked 13th on the Demon Fire list. It's rumored that it has the power to burn the heavens and earth. Nyetian nodded slightly, waiting for Gu Yi to continue. Gu Yi took out a gray sheepskin scroll and unfolded it in front of Nyetian. It was actually a map, but there was a white halo flowing on it from time to time. This is Demon Fire Diagram? Nyetian looked at the map in Gu Yi's hand and was quite surprised. Gu Yi was even more surprised, looking at Nyetian with a stunned expression, and only said after a long time, You actually know about the Demon Fire Diagram? Demon Fire Diagram, Nyetian naturally knew about it. It was rumored that an ancient god realm alchemist had sensed the distribution of the demon fire in the world, and drew a map of the demon fire distribution. After that god realm alchemist finished drawing the demon fire diagram, he worked hard and died of exhaustion. The most amazing thing about the demon fire diagram was not that it marked the location of the demon fire, but that it could sense the location of all the demon fire, and update the map at any time. The demon fire was born from heaven and earth, and had existed in the world for tens of thousands of years. The demon fire had a very high intelligence, and would not stay in the same place. Their movements were erratic, and very few people could discover their whereabouts. The demon fire was the favorite of alchemists, artifact refiners, and spirit array masters, and it was something that everyone dreamed of. Different demon fires had different characteristics, and they could bring out the characteristics of spirit pills, spirit weapons, or spirit arrays to an extremely terrifying degree. However, the demon fire was an extremely violent existence, and the difficulty of fusing with the demon fire was beyond imagination. Since ancient times, there were countless people who tried to fuse with the demon fire, but the majority of them were devoured by the demon fire, and in the end, their souls were destroyed. There were very few people who could successfully fuse with the demon fire, but every one of them was an existence that shocked the past and present. Nye Tian once had the chance to fuse with the seventh demon fire, Moth Dragon Heavenly Flame, but at that time, he was proud and arrogant, and only thought about the boundary of the first demon fire universe, so he gave up on fusing with the Moth Dragon Heavenly Flame. After that, he wanted to find the Moth Dragon Heavenly Flame, but he could not find it anymore. Because the demon fire's movements were erratic, the legendary demon fire diagram became the world's most precious treasure. According to the rumors, the demon fire diagram was completely destroyed during the last great war of gods and demons in the ancient times. There was another rumor that the demon fire diagram was not destroyed, but it was cut into countless pieces and scattered across the world. Alchemists and artifact refiners tended to believe the latter rumor, because it could give people unlimited hope. When Nye Tian was in the heaven realm, he had seen a piece of the demon fire diagram in the hands of the president of the Alchemist Guild, so he always knew that the demon fire diagram was not destroyed and still existed. Chapter 138. At this moment, Nye Tian couldn't help but feel excited. Never in his dreams did he think that he would actually be able to see the demon fire diagram in this kind of place. The demon fire diagram recorded the top 100 demon fires on the demon fire list. The demon fire diagram could automatically sense the existence of the demon fire and draw out the hiding place of the demon fire at any time. Nye Tian saw that on the demon fire diagram, white halos were slowly circulating, gradually drawing out a map. Then, all of the halos converged at one point and flickered on the demon fire diagram. This is. Nye Tian looked at the map in front of him and felt that it was incomparably familiar. His expression immediately changed as he said in astonishment, "This is Blue Cloud Empire." The map of Blue Cloud Empire appeared on the demon fire diagram. This undoubtedly meant that the demon fire was in Blue Cloud Empire. Gu Yi looked at the excited expression on Nye Tian's face and only faintly smiled and said, "Young Master Nye, please take a closer look." Since Gu Yi had already taken out the demon fire diagram, he naturally didn't want to hide anything. He could tell that Nye Tian wasn't the kind of person who would forget righteousness at the sight of profit and would definitely not covet his demon fire diagram. That was why he dared to take out such a precious thing. Nye Tian carefully observed the demon fire diagram. His gaze wandered around the place where the halos converged. Suddenly, he discovered an important piece of information, causing his entire body to stiffen. Seeing Nye Tian's reaction, Gu Yi already knew that Nye Tian had seen through the clues on the demon fire diagram. He said, "Young Master Nye, your observation is correct. The demon fire is in Blue Cloud City, and it is in Tyrant Cloud Academy." Nye Tian had an astonished look on his face. He only reacted after a long while. Just now, after looking at the map for a long time, he discovered that the place where the halos converged was actually Blue Cloud City, and it was in Tyrant Cloud Academy. At this moment, Nye Tian finally knew why Gu Yi would hide in a place like Blue Cloud Empire. Turned out that it was for the demon fire. Looking at the location of the demon fire diagram, it should be in Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range. Nye Tian calmed down and said while pointing at the demon fire diagram. At this moment, He was already calculating in his heart. If he could obtain the demon fire, he would definitely be able to suppress the demon fire within Jean de Bao's body. However, the demonic fire diagram was in Gu Yi's hands. Furthermore, this old fellow had prepared for such a long time for the demonic fire, and did not even hesitate to hide in a place like the black market. Clearly, he would not hand over the demonic fire so easily. Nie Tian did not want to snatch Gu Yi's devil fire diagram, but he had an idea in his heart. Gu Yi had been hiding in the black market for a long time, but he had not made a move on the demonic fire. This meant that he must have encountered some difficulties. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until now. Yes. Gu Yi put away the demon fire diagram and nodded. The demon fire is indeed in the Tyrant Cloud mountain range, and it is in a forbidden area of the mountain range. Old Gu, do you know which demonic fire this is? Nie Tian pretended to be nonchalant as he asked with a smile. The 13th demon fire, Doomsday Flame, Gu Yi said, pointing to the back of the demon fire diagram. At this time, Nie Tian saw that there were a few small words on the back of the demon fire diagram. 13th demon fire. Nie Tian still remembered that the demon fire diagram he had seen in the heaven realm had the words 3rd demon fire on its back. From the looks of it, the devil fire diagram had been divided into 100 parts, and each part contained a type of devil fire, which just so happened to be the top 100 devil fires on the devil fire list. Gu Yi then said, "The young alchemist beside you, the devil fire in his body is only a wisp of remnant flame from the doomsday flame. His luck is really good, to be able to successfully fuse with the remnant flames of the doomsday flame." Speaking up to here, Gu Yi actually pounded his chest, looking very angry. Seeing Gu Yi's reaction, Nie Tian laughed. Could it be that this remnant flame of the doomsday flame is related to Gu Yi? More than related. Gu Yi's face was filled with anger as he said, "More than 10 years ago, this old one went to the Tyrant Cloud mountain range in search of the demon fire. My luck wasn't bad, and I found the demon fire. Unfortunately, I was injured by the doomsday flame's main body. That strand of remnant flame was precisely from the doomsday flame's main body when this old one fought with the doomsday flame. This old man went through untold hardships and finally got rid of the doomsday flames. He wanted to search for that wisp of remnant flame, but he couldn't find it no matter how hard he tried. I didn't expect it to be absorbed and fused by the kid beside you." Nie Tian's face was filled with black lines, and he was speechless in his heart. Actually, this couldn't be blamed on Zhang Yifeng. It could only be said that his luck was too good, while Gu Yi's luck was too bad. Nie Tian guessed that the reason why Gu Yi became a 5th-rank alchemist from a 6th-rank alchemist was most likely because he was injured by the doomsday flame. But for Gu Yi to be able to escape from the doomsday flame, it was really a miracle. One must know that the doomsday flame was the 13th-rank demon fire, and after absorbing the baleful qi from the doomsday volcano for 10,000 years, the strength of its devilish nature was beyond imagination. "Gu Yi, what's your goal for telling me all these?" Nie Tian did not want to talk nonsense with Gu Yi, and went straight to the point. Gu Yi laughed mischievously and said, "Brother Nie, since we've already said till here, this old brother won't be courteous anymore. The doomsday flame is simply too strong, this old one can't subdue it by himself, so I wish to ask for your help." In order to win over Nie Tian, Gu Yi even changed the way he addressed him. "Ask for my help?" Nie Tian smiled faintly, waiting for Gu Yi to continue speaking. There was no free lunch in this world. He naturally would not help Gu Yi for nothing. Furthermore, with Gu Yi's status, what kind of expert could he not invite? But he just had to ask Nie Tian, this rookie, for help. There must be a hidden reason behind it. Gu Yi also knew what Nie Tian was thinking about, and said with a chuckle, "Brother Nie, elder brother naturally won't let you help for nothing. As long as you can help me subdue the doomsday flame, you can take anything in my Dan Heart Pavilion. Also, your purple dragon whisker, you can take it back too. As Gu Yi said, he actually really wanted to return the purple dragon whisker to Nie Tian. But Nie Tian was not moved in the slightest. Instead, he said with a faint smile, Gu Yi, you're a smart person. If you take me to be a fool, then there's no need to continue talking between us. Gu Yi, this old fellow was too crafty, even treating Nie Tian like a child to dupe. How high the value of the Doomsday Flame was, how could Nie Tian not know? Even if Gu Yi gave the Dan Heart Pavilion to Nie Tian, it was not even 1,000th of the Doomsday Flame. Asking Nie Tian to help him out so much, but only giving him such a low reward. This was simply insulting Nie Tian's IQ. As Nie Tian spoke, he made a posture of raising his feet to leave. Gu Yi saw this and panicked as expected. He hurriedly pulled Nie Tian and said with an awkward smile, Brother Nie, let's talk about it. How about this, you name your own price. Whatever reward you want, as long as I have it, I can give it to you. Gu Yi had a generous look. If an ordinary person saw his expression of cutting flesh, they might really be moved. But who was Nie Tian? Of course, he would not be fooled by this kind of small trick. Nie Tian turned around and looked at Gu Yi with a serious face, saying, It's not impossible for me to help you subdue the Doomsday Flame. But the Doomsday Flame that we obtain must be divided equally. Divided equally? Gu Yi panicked. His old face twitched as he said with difficulty, Brother Nie, isn't this request of yours a little too much? However, Nie Tian chuckled and said, Gu Yi, I haven't finished saying my request. What are you in a hurry for? You still have other requests? Gu Yi's face twitched. Nie Tian was not a lion opening its mouth, but a whale opening its mouth. Chapter 139. After Nie Tian finished speaking, Gu Yi stiffened and did not respond for a long time. If not for Nie Tian's serious expression, he would have thought that the other party was joking. The Devil Fire diagram belonged to Gu Yi. For the Doomsday Flame, Gu Yi had been hiding in the black market for more than 20 years. He had even been injured by the Doomsday Flame. Even the remnant flame of the Doomsday Flame that he had forced out with his life had been muddle-headed by Nie Tian's disciple. Let's not talk about this for the time being. Now that he had asked for Nie Tian's help, the other party actually raised such high conditions. This was simply choking Gu Yi to the point that he could not spit out a single word. The Doomsday Flame would be divided equally, and the other things would all belong to Nie Tian. Most importantly, Nie Tian actually wanted the Devil Fire diagram in Gu Yi's hands. It had to be said that this series of conditions of Nie Tian was indeed a little too much. Young Master Nie, your request is too much. This old man cannot agree. Gu Yi's mouth twitched for a long time as he said angrily. Moreover, Gu Yi had a question in his heart. Once they found the Doomsday Flame, the Devil Fire diagram in his hands would be useless. What did Nie Tian want the Devil Fire diagram for? Since that's the case, then I can only apologize. Nie Tian had already expected this reaction from Gu Yi. He only smiled apologetically and immediately turned to leave without saying a word. Nie Tian walked away step by step, but he was counting his steps in his heart. When he counted to 10, he was already about to walk out of the Dan Heart Pavilion. Just at this time, Gu Yi's voice sounded. Brother Nie. Gu Yi took a few steps forward and pulled Nie Tian back. He squeezed out a stiff smile and said, Why are you so inflexible? You can't even say a few words and then you leave. Let's discuss it again. Gu Yi, I am still waiting to save my friend. Actually, if not for saving my friend, I would not want the other half of the demon fire. Nie Tian's face revealed a trace of embarrassment, but his heart was blooming with joy. He knew that this old fox Gu Yi had finally given in. Nie Tian had long since seen that Gu Yi must have encountered an extremely thorny problem, otherwise it would be impossible for him to bitterly wait for more than 10 years without making a move. With Gu Yi's status, it was very easy for him to invite a few true energy realm or even spirit wheel realm warriors. However, he did not do so. This undoubtedly meant that the problem he encountered was not something that could be solved by force. Since Gu Yi was so persistent in asking Nie Tian for help, then Nie Tian naturally had to raise the price. As the saying goes, only an idiot would not take advantage of an opportunity. At a time like this, wouldn't Nie Tian be stupid if he didn't ruthlessly bite Gu Yi? Gu Yi had a serious expression as he looked at Nie Tian. He didn't dare take the latter to be a child any longer, and he'd cursed Nie Tian 100 times in his heart. This stinking brat that's still wet behind his ears has a heart that's even blacker than mine. Brother Nie, can't you change your conditions? Gu Yi could already tell that Nie Tian was definitely not the kind of person who could bargain, so he might as well ask directly. I can't change it. Nie Tian nodded solemnly. His face was calm, without the slightest trace of a teenager's childishness. On the contrary, he was like an extremely shrewd old fox. Fine. Gu Yi let out a long sigh and said angrily, I agree. Gu Yi's goatee straightened, and the expression on his face was more painful than having his flesh cut off. Originally, he wanted to trick Nie Tian once, but he didn't expect to be extorted instead. It really made him speechless. Gu Yi didn't even understand how he unknowingly fell into Nie Tian's trap. It's a deal. Nie Tian smiled knowingly. He didn't expect Gu Yi to be so straightforward. He originally thought that he would have to put in a lot of effort. Gu Yi, this old fox, no matter how he looked at it, was not someone who was easy to deal with. For him to agree to Nie Tian's conditions so readily, he must have encountered some big trouble. Since both parties already came to an agreement, Gu Yi no longer concealed it and said straightforwardly, the Doomsday Flame is currently hiding in a forbidden land in Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range. The forbidden land's name is Burial Cloud Abyss. Rumor has it that Burial Cloud Abyss is a mass grave formed during the ancient fiend god Great War. The interior is filled with baleful qi, and it's the Doomsday Flame's favorite. Mass grave? Nie Tian frowned slightly and immediately became interested. In ancient times, fiend gods fought endlessly. Since Burial Cloud Abyss was a mass grave left behind during the fiend god Great War, there might be many treasures inside. Luckily, I made it clear in advance. The other things obtained are all mine. Nie Tian couldn't help praising his own wisdom in his heart and immediately asked, Old Gu, you've already been to Burial Cloud Abyss. There should be many forbidden arrays inside, right? Old Gu shook his head and sighed, saying, Honestly speaking, the last time I entered Burial Cloud Abyss, I only circled around the periphery and didn't enter the depths of the abyss. So I'm not sure what's inside the abyss either. Nie Tian nodded his head and asked curiously, I'm very curious. With your status, you can totally invite experts much stronger than me. Why must you make me help? Stinking brat, do you think that I really want you to help? Gu Yi laughed bitterly and said, The last time I entered Burial Cloud Abyss, I discovered that there are powerful restrictions inside the abyss. If Manifestation Realm and above martial artists enter, their strength will be suppressed by the restrictions. Also, the stronger the martial artist's strength, the stronger the suppression. In order to enter Burial Cloud Abyss, this old man did not hesitate to consume forbidden pills and forcefully suppressed my strength back to the 9th level essence spirit realm. This. Nie Tian looked at Gu Yi suspiciously and said with an embarrassed smile, Old Gu, for the sake of the fiend fire, you're really going all out. That's of course. Gu Yi had a proud look as he said, I pursue alchemy wholeheartedly. Martial path cultivation isn't important to me. Forget about my strength falling back to the 9th level essence spirit realm. Even if I fall back to essence meridian martial artist, I won't hesitate to. Gu Yi said it vehemently and passionately, but Nie Tian was speechless. Then why do you need my help? Isn't it easier to find martial artists below the manifestation realm? Nie Tian continued to ask. Martial artists below the manifestation realm are naturally easy to find. Gu-yi chuckled and looked at Nye Tian with a malicious look as he said, "But martial artists below the manifestation realm who possess strength comparable to giant spirit realm martial artists are not easy to find. Inside Burial Cloud Abyss, dangers are everywhere. Furthermore, there are forbidden formations and traps everywhere. Ordinary essence spirit martial artists, however many go in, they all die." "Then on what basis do you think that I won't die if I go in?" Nye Tian looked at that malicious look of Gu Yi's and smiled speechlessly. Gu Yi's smile became even more horrifying as he said, "Younger brother Nye, you're not an ordinary essence spirit martial artist. You're an essence spirit martial artist with strength comparable to the giant spirit realm. The battle between you and that assassin that day, old brother saw it all. Annihilation Earth Seal, this move is world-shaking. Most likely, even ordinary giant spirit martial artists will find it hard to receive it too. You're absolutely the person I'm looking for." So that was how it was. Looks like that day when Nye Tian and Tang Yuyu battled, Gu-yi this old fox had been secretly observing all along. Nye Tian finally understood why Gu-yi would agree to his terms so readily. People like Nye Tian who only had essence spirit realm strength, but possessed the battle prowess of the giant spirit realm, were 1 in a trillion. If Gu-yi missed out on Nye Tian this time, perhaps he would never be able to find a second person like Nye Tian forever. Chapter 140. Gu-yi looked at Nye Tian and suddenly asked, "Brother Nye, I have a question that I don't understand. Once we get the Doomsday Flame, this demon fire diagram number 13 will be useless. Why do you still want it?" Nye Tian smiled mysteriously and said, "I have my own use for it, but I can't tell you. TSK. I don't care about it." Gu-yi waved his hand, looking as though he didn't care at all. Nye Tian wanted the demon fire diagram because he had his own use for it. Once he found the Doomsday Flame, the demon fire diagram number 13 would lose its use for searching for demonic flames. But it was still a demon fire diagram. Nye Tian wanted to study the demon fire diagram properly and figure out how it sensed the existence of demonic flames. As long as he understood the principle of the demon fire diagram, Nye Tian could make his own demon fire diagram. At that time, he would know the existence of all demonic flames. However, the demon fire diagram was the work of an ancient god realm alchemist. It was definitely not easy to understand its profoundness. But Nye Tian liked to do things that were not easy. There was a saying that if one did not dare to challenge a difficult task, it was to limit one's potential. "Afu!" At this moment, Gu-yi suddenly shouted, "Big brother, I'm here." A low, muffled voice came from the Dan Hart Pavilion. Then, a very strange figure walked out. This figure was only the height of a 10-year-old child, but he had an abnormally thick beard that covered his entire face. Furthermore, his figure was very robust, giving people a feeling that his entire body was filled with strength. "Dwarf clan?" Nye Tian looked at Tong Fu and exclaimed, "Yo!" Tong Fu looked at Nye Tian and laughed loudly. "Little boy, you seem to have a lot of knowledge. You actually know that I am the noblest dwarf clan warrior." Gu-yi also looked at Nye Tian in surprise. He didn't expect Nye Tian to know about the existence of the dwarf clan. Actually, in this world, other than humans, there were also dwarfs, elves, beastmen, and demons. However, these races were defeated by humans in the ancient war, so they declined. Dwarfs, elves, beastmen and demons could only be seen occasionally in first-rate empires. They had basically been reduced to human slaves and had a very low status in the human society. Among Nye Tian's 9 direct disciples, one of them was a dwarf clan warrior. Therefore, when he saw Tong Fu, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Nye Tian laughed. "You are also very good, you are already a 9th-level giant spirit realm." Although the dwarves were much smaller than humans, their physiques were much stronger than humans, and their lifespans were several times longer than humans. A 100-year-old dwarf, if measured by human age, would be considered to have just reached adulthood, which meant that he was in his 20s. Therefore, Tong Fu's martial arts aptitude was very heaven-defying, almost comparable to MOU or raindrop thousand leave. Tian looked at Tian and asked, Tian gu Tian, who is Tian? Tian m dong e ti tong. Gu Tian gu e shook his head innocently. He was even more surprised than Tong Fu. Even Gu Yi couldn't tell Tong Fu's age and strength at a glance. In fact, Nye Tian was able to do it not because his perception was above Gu Yi's, but because he had a dwarf clan disciple in his previous life, and was more familiar with the dwarf clan. Tong Fu looked at Nye Tian with a strange look and said, Brat, quickly say, how do you know my age and strength? Nye Tian smiled speechlessly and said honestly, I have a friend who is a dwarf, so I am more familiar with the dwarf clan. You have a friend from the dwarf clan? Tong Fu let out a strange cry. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he laughed mischievously. Is it a man or a woman? It must be a woman, right? Can you introduce her to this lord? This lord has a dignified appearance, an imposing appearance, and lush body hair. She will definitely like me. Nye Tian was speechless. This dwarf must have gone crazy from thinking about his wife. I'm sorry, my friend is a man. Nye Tian had an apologetic look on his face. A man? Tong Fu was quite disappointed, but soon after, he thought of something and said excitedly, a man is fine too. A man is fine too? Nye Tian's body trembled, and he immediately felt a chill. Tong Fu laughed mischievously and said, He definitely has an older sister, younger sister, or cousin, right? Hurry up and bring your friend over. Only then did Nye Tian react. He let out a sigh of relief and said, My friend isn't here, I really can't bring him over. Nye Tian's dwarf clan disciple was in the heaven realm, how could he possibly come here? Furthermore, he doesn't have an older sister, younger sister, or cousin, but he does have a daughter. Nye Tian still remembered that before he died, his dwarf clan disciple's daughter had just been born. Right now, she should be a little more than 100 years old, and she really is a good match for Tong Fu. Thinking up to here, Nye Tian became speechless. It seems like I have thought too far into the future. Tong Fu still wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Gu Yi. Gu Yi said, Fu, don't pester brother Nye anymore. I said that I will find you a wife, and I will definitely do it. Big brother, you have to keep your word, Tong Fu said solemnly. Of course. Gu Yi nodded heavily, then continued, Fu, for the next period of time, I will be doing some things with brother Nye, so I will leave the Dan Hart Pavilion to you. When I am not here, close the Dan Hart Pavilion for the time being. If you encounter any problems, don't pester others, wait for me to come back. Gu Yi's words were sincere and earnest, just like how an adult would instruct a child to look after the house after leaving home. However, looking at Tong Fu's age, he was indeed still a child. Furthermore, the dwarf clan had a special characteristic, they were stubborn. Once they set their mind on something, even 100 black bulls wouldn't be able to pull them back. Big brother, you are going out? Bring me along, I will definitely not cause any trouble. I promise. Tong Fu was very excited, excitedly raising his hand to guarantee. However, Gu Yi shook his head and said, Brother Nye and I have something important to take care of, we can't bring you along. Tong Fu was unhappy, he pulled Gu Yi and said, Big brother, I beg of you, bring me along. Nye Tian was speechless as he watched from the side. Although Tong Fu had lived for nearly 100 years, he was still a child who had not grown up. Gu Yi put on a stern face and pretended to be angry. Fu, don't be like this. If you continue like this, Big Brother won't find you a wife. This move was indeed effective. When Tong Fu heard that Gu Yi was not going to find him a wife, he immediately let go of Gu Yi's clothes and put his hands behind his back. He chuckled and said, Big brother, don't worry. When you are not here, Fu will definitely look after the Dan Hart Pavilion. I guarantee that not a single medicinal ingredient will be missing. Gui nodded and waved his hand. You can go. Tong Fu agreed and turned to return to the inner hall of the Dan Hart Pavilion. Halfway there, he thought of something and suddenly turned to Nie Tian and said, Little boy, don't forget to introduce your friend to me. After saying this, Tong Fu felt relieved and went back. Chapter 141. Nie Tian and Gu Yi left the black market and entered Blue Cloud City. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry to enter Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range. He first returned to the Jin estate to meet Jin Mingxin before heading to Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range with Gu Yi. Nie Tian and Gu Yi planned to enter Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range directly from Tyrant Cloud Academy. Moreover, they did so with great fanfare. Just as they were about to enter Tyrant Cloud Academy, all the forces in Blue Cloud City made a move. Binji Estate. What? Nie Tian and an old man entered Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range? Lan Binji spat out a mouthful of tea because he was too excited. It's true, Qin Yulong said with a strange expression. News just came from Tyrant Cloud Academy. There's only him and an old man. I wonder what they're doing in Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range? The Qin clan had been following Nie Tian for the past few days. It could be said that Nie Tian's every move was under the Qin clan's control. However, the Qin clan naturally wouldn't make a move against Nie Tian again. Even if Nie Tian went to the black market, the Qin clan wouldn't dare to act rashly. What's the old man's strength? Lan Binji asked. I don't know. Qin Yulong shook his head and said. He seems to be someone from the black market. I sent someone to inquire about him. He's the shopkeeper of a medicine shop in the black market. He shouldn't be very strong. A medicine shop shopkeeper? Lan Binji rubbed his chin and said in surprise. Could it be that Nie Tian wants to enter Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range to pick herbs? Very likely. Qin Yulong said with a sinister smile. Your Highness, anything can happen if Nie Tian enters Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range. Should we do something? Lan Binji naturally understood what Qin Yulong meant. He smiled coldly and said, Of course we should do something. How can this prince miss such a good opportunity to kill Nie Tian? Anything could happen if Nie Tian entered Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range. It was very likely that he would die in Tyrant Cloud Mountain Range. This was undoubtedly a good opportunity to kill Nie Tian. Bang! Lan Binji's heart skipped a beat. He directly smashed the teacup and smiled coldly. Let's go find Shang Mingyu right now. He'll definitely be very interested. At the same time, in a secret place in Blue Cloud City, a black-robed figure was hidden in the darkness. He did not move at all, as if he had already merged with the darkness. A moment later, another black-robed figure appeared. It was Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu bowed to the person in the darkness and called out, Godfather. You're here. The Blood Bat sect master's breathing was weak, his voice like a funeral bell. He said in a deep voice, Are your injuries healed? I am. Yuyu nodded. After being injured by Nie Tian last time, Tang Yuyu had rested for more than 10 days, and now he had completely recovered. Her body had recovered, but the trauma to her heart had not. Instead, it was getting worse by the day. Tang Yuyu had failed twice, and the second time, he was even injured by Nie Tian. Tang Yuyu's career as an assassin was facing a huge challenge. Every time she thought of Nie Tian, Tang Yuyu's life as an assassin was facing a huge challenge. If she couldn't kill Nie Tian, she would feel as if there was a thorn in her back. Tang Yuyu, do you know why you lost to Nie Tian twice? Gao Jin said in a low voice. Tang Yuyu thought for a moment and said, I was too careless. Careless? Gao Jin smiled. Is it really as simple as carelessness? According to my observation, Nie Tian is stronger than you. If you meet him again, you will definitely fail. That won't happen. Tang Yuyu roared and shouted, Absolutely not. Gao Jin didn't say anything. He threw a pill to Tang Yuyu. Yuan burst pill. Tang Yuyu took the pill and was stunned. Gao Jin said, This is a 4th stage Yuan burst pill. After taking it, you can break through to the giant spirit realm in an instant. I hope you won't let me down this time. Yes. Thank you, foster father. Tang Yu bowed. Go. Nye Tian is in the tyrannical cloud mountain range. Gao Jin's figure disappeared into the darkness. Nye Tian, this time, I will definitely kill you. Tang Yu held the Yuan burst pill tightly. A cold light flickered in his eyes. Tang Yu, you have another mission this time. Furthermore, this mission is more important than killing Nye Tian. Gao Jin nodded slightly. A strange light shone in his eyes. Foster father, please speak. Tang Yu said respectfully. Kill Lan Binji. Gao Jin said word by word. His voice was extremely gloomy. In the tyrannical cloud mountain range, Nye Tian and Gu Yi walked side by side. Nye Tian had a faint smile on his face. He looked very relaxed. Gu Yi, who was beside him, became more and more confused. His brows furrowed even more. Finally, Gu Yi couldn't bear it any more and asked angrily, Nye Tian, you were the one who attracted those people behind us, right? Has Elder Gu sensed it? How many people are there? Nye Tian didn't find it strange. His mental power wasn't strong enough, and his divine sense wasn't strong enough. Therefore, he didn't notice that someone was following him. However, he seemed to have known that someone was following him. That's right, Nye Tian already knew that someone was following him. The reason why he returned to the Jin residence and entered the tyrannical cloud mountain range without hesitation was to send a message to his enemies. Nye Tian is going to the tyrannical cloud mountain range. This is a good opportunity to kill him. Lan Binji, Qin clan, Shang Mingyu, and the assassins hiding in the dark. These were the enemies that Nye Tian was facing. However, Nye Tian's current strength wasn't enough to fight them head-on. Therefore, he could only use a trick to lure the snake out of its hole. Nye Tian wanted these enemies to take the initiative to find him. This way, he would be able to eliminate them one by one. As long as he entered the tyrannical cloud mountain range, Nye Tian was confident that he could deal with any enemies. Stinking brat, you lured them here on purpose. Gu Yi immediately understood and said exasperatedly, You've really offended a lot of people. Apart from the assassin from last time, there are actually 2 more groups of people following us. Tell me about these people's strength. Nye Tian couldn't sense the existence of the people following him, but with Gu Yi around, things were much easier. Tang Yu and the others had been following Nye Tian in secret, thinking that they had concealed their auras perfectly. However, they hadn't expected that this ordinary-looking old man by Nye Tian's side was actually a freak with a spiritual power as high as level 65. With Gu Yi's current spiritual perception, within a 5-kilometer radius around him, he would be able to see even the slightest movement in the grass. Nye Tian's spiritual power was only at level 41, and his perception range was only about 1 kilometer or so. Stinking brat, you're using I as a sensing spirit stone. Gu Yi scolded exasperatedly, but still said, Apart from that assassin, there's also a 9th-level Wanxiang martial artist, and a group of 4 people. One is at the 1st level of the Wanxiang realm, 2 are at the 7th level, and 1 is at the 9th level. Wow! What a terrifying lineup. Even I'm a little scared. Nye Tian snickered, guessing who these people should be. Gu Yi was so angry that his old face twitched, and he said in his heart, Is this a sign of fear? I can see that you're over the moon. Actually, to be honest, Gu Yi was more or less a little nervous right now, worried that Nye Tian wouldn't be able to deal with these little tales. If Gu Yi had known that Nye Tian still had this trick of luring the snake out of its hole, he would have brought Tong Fu out to deal with these annoying little tales first. But it was too late to say anything now. Gu Yi only had the strength of the 9th level of Origin Spirit, which was just a little stronger than ordinary Wanxiang martial artists. The rest could only depend on Nye Tian.